In a land far, far away, behind a pair of microphones, two generic guys said that most novel of phrases. We should start a podcast. And after months of postponing and rescheduling, they're finally ready to make it everyone's problem. The Dork Place presents Shit I Love with People I Like. New episode every Wednesday. I know. Okay, there's one. And then let me get Chase.
Can we hear me? Am I alive?
Hang on. Now you should hear Chase too.
You should hear me. Hello.
Well,
Welcome.
son of a bitch.
Welcome, AJ, to your podcast.
Hi, everybody. I restarted my computer today because of updates, and it decided to just forget about all of my mics and everything.
Who needs microphones?
But welcome back to Shit I Love with People I Like. I'm AJ, this is Chase, and tonight we're talking about The Last of Us.
The Baja Blast of Us.
Why have I not used that? I'm stealing
Where have you
that
been?
one.
There are like logo edits for the Baja Blast of Us.
I'm stealing that one now. I've been over here like the best of us and the rest of us.
Get with it. Get with it. I love The Last of Us Part 1 so much.
Oh my god,
End of episode.
I'm so happy that we're finally having this discussion and stuff, because I remember, so just to set you guys up, I remember replaying through the franchise before The Last of Us 2 Remastered came out. And I still haven't played the remaster of Part 2. I have it. I'm set up to start it soon. But I haven't played the remaster. But anyway, so I'm playing through the series, and I'm playing The Last of Us Part 2, and I want to say that Chase had been in and out of the streams, like, fairly regularly, but wasn't, like, super active. And then when I hit that game, immediately it's like I activated a light switch, and Chase was there all the time to talk about stuff. And it's hard to have a conversation that's as nuanced and critical as we were trying to have when one of you is on chat and the other one is talking. And so we have pretty purposefully not completely talked about this in anticipation of tonight.
Yeah, I have, and this preface will be made many times throughout the night. I do not like The Last of Us Part 2. The reasons I do not like The Last of Us Part 2 have nothing to do with the Last of Us 2 subreddit reasons. Like, it has nothing to do with the identity politic warfare that like struck up when this game was released. I think The Last of Us Part 2 is a very well-made video game. I think there's lots to love. There's tons of people who love and adore this game. That's good for you. I had so many issues like day one with this game. Like, I bought it. I was stoked. Like, I bought it day one. Like, as soon as it came out, I got it actually a day early because there's like a store in New York that just releases games early. So like I was stoked to play this game, and the first like 4 hours, I was just like, I don't like this. But we will get into all the reasons. That being said, I have not seen the TV show, which we will talk about a little bit. I'm excited to see the TV show, and I'm excited for season 2 and 3, however they're planning it out, because one of the things we'll talk about is I think that type of storytelling works with the storytelling that Last of Us 2 was trying to go with, way better than in a video game. Um, but The Last of Us Part 1
You
is
know,
one of my favorite video games of all time. I will say that.
really quickly before we change gears to the first part, I want to give another disclaimer of my own that's kind of on the opposite end. I didn't play The Last of Us 2 until I knew the twist. Like, the game had been out a couple of years. I knew Abby's backstory. Oh, by the way, fucking spoilers.
Yeah.
Like, this is your spoiler warning. We're gonna spoil the fuck out of this game.
3, 2, 1. Joel gets smashed with a golf club, guys.
But, like, I knew the twist going into the game, and I knew why she did it. And I genuinely think that peppered my experience a little bit. Like, I do think it did, because it already made me lead with sympathy that I'm sure was not there for people who played day one, you know? And so, like, we'll get to it, but, like, I think that I was able to see things in the narrative. Like, one thing I'll talk about is comparisons between Abby and Joel that I think people were unable to see. A lot of people, the first time you're playing it, simply because you're experiencing this and your emotions are so high and you're so connected to that first game, that I think it's difficult, not impossible, but difficult to see some of that stuff the first time you play the game. Like, and that's something we'll talk about, is that how do you judge a game based on your first encounter with it versus future? Like, I think The Last of Us Part 2 is better the first time you play it. But I digress. But yeah, so I want to say that I did go into it knowing the twist. I do think that peppered my experience. Oh, and I will warn you guys, my opinions, a lot of the things that I draw from issues with The Last of Us Part 2 are going to veer political. And not in an Abby woke DEI bullshit kind of way, in a author's biasy, Zionist Israel Palestine kind of way. And I promise you, when I get to it, it will make sense. I absolutely promise that I'm not going in some weird tangent. I just want to get that out there ahead of time.
I'm in the same boat as you for other reasons, that being included, but we will get to that, because I have very strong political issues with this game that are not Abby have muscle gross.
Right. I think, but as I've said, I will say and continue to say, I think that this game is good art. Whether you like the game or not, I feel like it is good art in the sense that it invites conversation. And I think that good art invites conversation. It may not, like, I think it is worthwhile having, because we can have these discussions. Not necessarily because it is like the greatest thing ever made and we have a universal consensus about it. In fact, I think that a lot of times good art does not have universal consensus. Okay, now let's take it back for just a second. I do want to give you a quick icebreaker. This goes out to everybody in the chat too. What is your favorite post-apocalyptic video game? Like, there's been a bunch of them, from your Fallouts to The Last of Us and everything in between. So whether it's because of story or gameplay or visuals, what is your favorite post-apocalyptic video game? And would you want to live in that world? Like, how long do you think you would last in that world?
Oh, so I have a bunch. Like, there's also like my favorite versus like the best.
Hmm.
It also comes into play. Like, I think one of the best post-apocalyptic games is Fallout New Vegas. It's a really, really good video game with a great story, great atmosphere, all of that. My favorite, honestly, probably Left 4 Dead 2. That game is so
Yes,
fucking fun.
I fucking love that game.
It's so good. Like, I still play it every once in a while with friends. We will just hop on and be like, let's shoot some zombies and like do dumb stuff. Like, it's a game that, like, what I think is so cool about that game in particular is, for me personally, there is like a level of difficulty and challenge, that there's like a fine line of like, it's too difficult and it's no longer fun. It's too easy, also no longer fun. Left 4 Dead at any difficulty is incredible. From like super easy, like I don't care, who cares, we're gonna shoot the witch 100 times and not worry about it, to
God,
like, do not get hit by a zombie on expert mode.
I
Like,
love, like, we need more games like that in general. Like, I miss, like, design wise, that game is really simple, but it's so good. Like, is there any, there are few things more terrifying than your group walking down a hallway and you just start hearing that really subtle crying
oh yeah,
from down the way, and you're
terrible,
like, where the
terrible.
fuck is she? Where the fuck is it?
And then she's always like in a doorway, like, really, really.
Oh,
Thanks, AI narrator.
what a good choice. The Teletubbies mod. Oh my god.
The modding scene. There are times I will be scrolling on TikTok and I'll see a live. I'm like, wow, what tactical shit? Oh, this is Left 4 Dead modded to shit. Like, like, this is insane.
Oh,
So yeah, no, the modding community for Left 4 Dead
fuck.
is so good.
What the hell? Hi, Josh. Let's maybe I should turn those off during the
Oh,
podcast.
did you get banged?
Yeah, I got banged. And maybe we should refrain from getting banged, mainly because of the audio recording.
Nice.
Oh shit. Okay. My answer was going to be Horizon. That's my favorite
Okay.
post-apocalyptic story. I experienced both of those games on stream, and the first one absolutely blew my mind. From terms of like story, not only did it feel believable, especially in a world where AI is really starting to take over a lot of industries. I felt like there was a lot, especially in the first game, that spoke to a lot of what's going on in the world. And come on, you mean to tell me that we created an AI that loved dinosaurs, so when repopulating the earth with like robot things, it repopulated it with robot dinosaurs? That's adorable and also fucking awesome. And I would probably not survive very long at all in that world, but
No,
but
none
it's
of them.
beautiful. It's gorgeous, and I want to at least see a robot dinosaur before it takes me out.
One like shout out is like the Stalker series, and like Stalker 2 came out recently. And I have been playing that a little bit, but like I've spent so much time playing the Stalker games. Another good modding scene. Those are like really fun post-apocalyptic. Like, if you care about like radiation and you like the like tactical shooter element of games, the Stalker series is really, really good.
Also, shout out to Atomfall, which just came out, which is not bad. It is a game made with a lot of care, a lot of fun. Like, there's a lot to it for a game that's only 15-20 hours. I will admit I would not recommend paying $70 for it personally. I think it's definitely a play on Game Pass, get on sale kind of game, and I don't like to say that, but that's kind of how I feel.
I think we're getting to that point where a lot of that the only way I can put it is like if you remember games like Dark Sector and Dark Void and The Darkness, like games with dark in them, it seems like, or like 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. I don't know if you remember that game. These like games that like they are not your Call of Duties, your Gears of Wars. Um, like they're no longer becoming like the double A games, I guess is maybe what you would call them, but they are becoming like the Game Pass games where it's just like try it out. It's probably going to be something you haven't played before and it's like a new experience, but it's worth trying because you might like it and you might just sink a bunch of hours into it. And hey, if you got it on Game Pass, cool. If you didn't like it, just uninstall it.
And quick shout out also, speaking of games on Game Pass, and a perfect example of that, give a try to South of Midnight if you have Game Pass. I do think it is a pretty niche game. I think it's the kind of game, weirdly enough, gameplay wise and story wise, it's the kind of game that the angry right mob wants, but they don't want because it's a very, very Southern black story. And they don't want it for that. But they want it for the gameplay and everything I've seen of that. So, like, it's an interesting.
Hello there.
Hello there,
I
General Ken.
I have seen people who, it's, obviously caused a lot of discourse, especially in certain circles, blah, blah, blah. Yep. But one of the things I did see was like, it's exactly what you said. Like, this is the game that all of those gamers TM have been asking for, but they won't play it because it's a black woman. It is
Yeah.
exactly what they're asking for. It's like
But
games were so much better back then, and it's like, yeah, this is
yeah,
a game that's like those games. It has modern touches to it. I haven't played it. I'm going to play it.
and
It looks fun.
I will say there will be people who will be turned off by that game, and that's why, just like Adamfall, it's a perfect game to experience on something like Game Pass. I will also say, especially with games that I think South of Midnight dropped as $40 at retail, like its main price, which is a good price for a video game in today's market. And I would encourage, especially with games like this from smaller developers and from diverse backgrounds, if you enjoy the game on Game Pass and you have the money, support the creator. Just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah, there's games I have on Game Pass that I have like bought,
Mm-hmm.
like that I was like, and there was like 0 hours on Steam. Like, cool. Like what we kind of talked about last week with Nintendo, put your money where your mouth is. Like vote with your wallet. You play a game on Game Pass, if you like it and it's just like, yeah, that was fun, I'm not going to come back to it, that's fine. But if you really liked it, you put a lot of hours into it, if you're able to buy that game
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, spend the money. Cuz the one huge downside to Game Pass is it's not the best for developers. It's the best for getting reach for your game. It is not the best as far as return on investment. So
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft takes a huge cut of Game Pass games. So keep
Facts.
that in mind.
Now, all of these games are good, but I think that we can agree that The Last of Us Part 1 may be a game, if any, that falls into the term masterpiece. And
I
I'm
agree.
gonna kick with that as
I
we
agree.
transition to talk about Part 1.
If I were to like really sit down and think of like a top 10 games I've played of all time, The Last of Us Part 1 is most likely going to be in that top 10 list. Um, it's it really revolutionized story and gameplay. Like video games have had good stories before, but not to this level, not to the connection of this. One thing I will say is, the PlayStation 3 version, obviously it's still a little dated. It still is a good looking game. Like I have booted up my PlayStation 3 and put in The Last of Us like within the past year. It's a great looking game. And I do think as much as like I don't think that graphics, like super realistic graphics, are always super important, there is a connection that can be had when that looks like a real person. Um, and I think that helps it. And I think just, from the storytelling, the art direction, the gameplay, all of it, everything combined, the music, it's it's a really, really powerful experience. Um, I can't say enough good things about the game. I'm a huge fan of part one.
Absolutely. And like you said, I mean, it really did change storytelling in video games. I don't think we have like the renaissance of storytelling that we exist in now without The Last of Us Part 1. I think that it's, again, before The Last of Us Part 2 was a piece of art that was divisive, so was this game.
Yeah.
Now, we all agreed it was fantastic, but we all also had opinions specifically about the ending of the game. And we are still, even with the show, still having conversations about that. And like I said, if art can inspire conversation, that's what makes it immortal. That's what makes it last, is that you go back to it. Like, even if you played The Last of Us Part 1 and you didn't love it, you might go back to replay it just so that you can experience it again and see what answer you come to.
Yeah. If we talk about the ending of The Last of Us Part 1, I think very few people were not shocked by the ending. I really do love the ending of The Last of Us Part 1 because I don't think there's a right or wrong answer when people talk about it. I think that comes from how you feel about the events of the game. I think that comes down to how you resonate. I think that comes down to your personal experiences. There's no definitive Joel was right, Joel was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Joel was wrong because he lied. That's the only thing he did that was wrong, was he lied to Ellie.
Well, and at its core, the end of The Last of Us, as has been discussed by people way more eloquent than we, it's the trolley problem. Because the reality is this: will they, won't they, when it comes to finding a cure? That being damned, the question is, do you save one person over potentially saving everyone else?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem comes in that, like, the reason I really wanted to talk about this game at least a little bit and this ending is because this is the catalyst for who Ellie is in The Last of Us Part 2. And if there is one thing I think The Last of Us Part 2 does very well, it is evolve Ellie as a character down a very logical path that begins with this moment.
Yeah, we'll get into it. There are problems I have with Ellie in The Last of Us Part 2. She is largely not the problem in The Last of Us Part 2 for me. I think that Ellie as a character in The Last of Us Part 1 is relatable. I think there is an element of the found family story within The Last of Us Part 1. There are so many things that were set up in The Last of Us Part 1 that directly affect my opinion of The Last of Us Part 2, namely just its visual storytelling, the stuff with Sarah and that. And I think that when we break down the choice of Joel doing what he did in the hospital and then lying about it, the lying is the bad part. He should have told her the truth. What he did to save her, that's where I think you kind of run into is he right, is he wrong? You'll never have the answer. It's up to you.
Well,
because she finds out, and we find out in the second part, she does find out. And there's consequences to that. There 100% are consequences to that.
Well, and I'll be very rigidly moral about it. It was a selfish decision. Yeah. He did not save Ellie for Ellie. Like, and we as parents will say that to ourselves a lot. We will say, oh, I would do this, like E-Ray's saying, I would do this for my kids because I want my kids to have a long life. But the question really, like, at the end of the day, you want them to have that long life. And while I don't think that Ellie is necessarily old enough or ready to make this decision for herself, the fact is, when you don't give her any sort of agency, you have to admit that you are making that decision. Like, he is making that decision himself. Now, is it the right decision? Is it the wrong decision? No one can answer that, like we've said. But it is a selfish decision. You know,
Yes.
he is doing it for him and justifying it through Ellie.
And the thing about the ending of that game is it's been dissected so many times in so many different ways. Like I've seen people who have broken down, like, even if they made a vaccine, they wouldn't be able to distribute the vaccine. There's no
Mhm.
way. There was no way they would be able to mass produce and distribute the vaccine. There's people who, they talk about, like, even if you had a vaccine, that doesn't stop. I don't even remember the timeline. It was like 18 years of, like, spore people running around. Like, that doesn't erase that. Like, just because you have a vaccine, like, law and order doesn't get restored overnight. It may never get restored at this point. Um, and I think, what's so interesting about The Last of Us Part One is the echo of the opening of the game is Joel could not save Sarah. And to atone for that, even though it was not his fault, he did nothing wrong. He still, for all that time, he carried that weight, he carried that guilt despite doing nothing wrong. And so he took the grief and the trauma and all the horrible things that he felt because of that night, and he did it to save his daughter because he couldn't
Mhm.
the first time. And it's like, it's a beautiful story. And it's like, yeah, he's not a good guy when you break it down. Like, he's a nice man, but he's done bad things. He's gone around with the wrong people before. And that's, victim of circumstance type stuff, right? It's just like, he didn't ask to be thrown into the zombie apocalypse. Like, that's not what he wants. And he made do. And, you can argue that he could have made better choices. He could have, done this and that. Well, that's not the story we got.
Mhm.
um he's not supposed to be this, like, pariah of, like, good deeds. He's supposed to
Yeah.
be a regular fucking person. And this is where my issues with The Last of Us Part 2 kind of start to come in.
Exactly. And this is where I think we're gonna get to, like, I'm biding my time a little bit. Just because there's a few more things I want to say about part one. But absolutely, the fact is, you're right. Joel is not a good person. Like, in the sense that he has done awful things. Like, I just in my replay of part one just got through with my favorite scene in both the show and the game, when he forces the one guy to show him the map on where we're going to find Ellie, who's with David. And he's
Mhm.
like, your buddy better say the same thing. Then he kills that guy. And the second guy's like, I'm not going to tell you anything. And he's like, it's okay. I believed him. And then just kills the other guy too. Like, no reason to murder both of those men.
Right.
Like,
Right.
but it's one of those where, like, he's a good person in the sense that he is a mostly moral individual. Like, in the
his
sense that,
his
like, he knows the difference between right and wrong. He is just very willing to justify wrong because of his own pain. And that is something that we will see carried over into Ellie. But Ellie's pain, both of them, it's guilt. Both of them, it's guilt
Yeah.
for totally different reasons. But honestly, now that you kind of mention it, like, it's guilt because they couldn't save the world, whether that is their world or whether that is the world. Like, he feels guilt that he couldn't save his world, his daughter, and she
Mhm.
feels guilt because all she's known for the majority of her life was that she was going to save the world. And now who is she? And you can see a very, like, the start of that in the closing credits of the game, when she asks him and he lies to her.
Yeah.
Like, you can see that she doesn't know who she is now.
Yeah, and that's what I do think that the first game did so well, and that's why I think you do put it in that masterpiece class, is because, well, I have friends that don't even like The Last of Us. They just like the concept of the game does not interest them. Like the way the story was told, the gameplay, it doesn't interest them, and that's totally fine. But I while I do agree, like good art invites good conversation. I think a majority of the people that are into that type of game and want a story that is effective that way, like, very much resonated with The Last of Us Part 1, and
Hmm.
that's why I think that The Last of Us Part 1 for so many people is a masterpiece, and I think you have a lot of people on the other side who, like, really love The Last of Us Part 2, even over The Last of Us Part 1, but I do think that the story that the first game told and the way it told it was so much more impactful than the second one did, and it's not to take away from anyone's opinions on the second game. It's just that I think you do have a, I don't want to say universal, but you have a more ubiquitous understanding that, like, what The Last of Us Part 1 did was very special.
I'm also going to say that The Last of Us Part 1, its longevity benefits from a very similar thing to something like the Star Wars prequels. And what I mean by that is we have a gruff white man as our protagonist who does morally questionable things, for good reasons, like for the sake of love, and
Sure.
that resonates with the kind of person, not always, it resonates with a lot of people, but it also very significantly resonates with the kinds of people who we were going to see be upset when the next entry in this franchise is led by a woman, and is led by a woman that they don't necessarily, doesn't exist simply for them. Like, and I say this is important because we yeah, and it vilifies their hero. That's something Ire said right there. It very much, like, Joel is a cowboy, and that's so important because it feeds into this long-standing American narrative of the, one man takes on the law. It doesn't matter what's right and wrong. Yeah, he murdered hundreds of people, but he did it to save, to save his daughter. And, like, a lot of American media over generations has made that man the hero, and has made American audiences, specifically American men, want to be that person. They want to be the hero who bucks the law in the name of what's right, what's moral to them, and fuck anybody else. And again, I only say that when not paired with media literacy, when not paired with empathy, the person who enjoys that story can easily be the person who says, well, I don't want to see anything else. I don't want to hear anything else. What do you mean Joel was the bad guy? You know what I mean? What do you mean he was wrong at all to anybody? And it's it's a tough line, and I don't blame anyone on The Last of Us Part 1, and I don't think it ruins its legacy. It's just we hadn't learned at the time how these stories are affecting the audience. Like I said, I compare it to the prequels specifically because Anakin Skywalker is not the hero. Like, it's a cautionary tale, and so many young men looked at that and were like, well, but he did it for love. That's a good reason. So it's okay. Everything he did is justified. And it's
Right.
like, again, we have to be careful to keep these nuanced conversations. Otherwise, we fall into a dangerous position where we only defend, Joel, where we only defend Anakin rather than admitting where they made
Yeah,
mistakes.
and to maybe contrast it, I think that Joel's circumstances, like, also help justify his actions.
Mhm.
because when you look at a character like Anakin and a lot of these cautionary tales, the cautionary tale is typically a person of privilege going down a dark path. Um, like not every single one, but a lot of them will be there as like a level of like they had the good life in one way or another, and they throw it away, right? That's the kind of the crux of the cautionary tale. Whereas Joel had an okay life and it was taken from him. And it's one of the things I do love about one is the visual storytelling. It's like we don't need to know what he did for a living. We don't need to know X, Y, and Z. He has a modest 2-story house with just him and his daughter. We don't know about the mom. We don't know anything. But we empathize with Joel because a lot of us probably grew up in a house like that. We probably had a friend that had a house like that. That it's not like a lavish building. It was in like a suburb that seemed like it had a busy street on it. And that's what made Joel such a relatable character compared to someone like Anakin who like has like superpowers basically. And Anakin has no real reason to lash out the way he does because he has the training to not do it and he has everything. He has an entire community and organization behind him to say, hey, you don't need to go down this path, whereas Joel doesn't. Joel has a world that is beating him down every moment of every day, like you said with the map. Is it's just like he doesn't have to, but what's the risk of him not? Are these guys going to come after him later?
The cautionary tale for Joel is hopelessness.
Yeah.
It's against losing hope. Like I've said many times, Bill is my favorite character in both the game and season 1 of the show for entirely different reasons, for almost the opposite reason. Like it's hilarious. But within the context of the game, Bill is who Joel is very, very much on his way to becoming. That is Joel's future. And if you look at it, it is not a bright future.
Right.
It's a terrible, depressing future. And the fact is, Joel's journey is to open up again. It's to it's to learn to love again. Like, and of course I don't mean in, a romantic way, but in a pure way, like that familial love. And if he doesn't open himself up to someone else, he's going to die a miserable old man like Bill.
Yes, and he's going to isolate himself with a bunch of traps. He's going to push the entire world out. No matter how oppressive that world is, he's going to push it away.
And that is what makes the ending hit so hard and make it such a question, is because you see Joel grow as a person. You see him connect to Ellie, and then you get to the end of the game and you're left kind of wondering, did I do the right thing? Was this the miserable old Joel who can't let go of things, who's attached and refuses to let go? Or is this the heroic Joel that is saving this girl who can't make this decision on her own? And like, it's, again, the cautionary tale of don't allow yourself to become so detached from everything that you become a monster is also paired with don't become so attached that you become a monster. It's such a, I think the difference between parts 1 and 2 is that there is no clear right and wrong in part 1. And I feel like there is a lot more right and wrong in part 2.
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that a lot. And I think the way they handle some of the characters and their rights and their wrongs is super messy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think should have been reworked before coming out to the larger public.
And just, I don't want to harp on the adaptation on the TV show because I know that you haven't had an opportunity to really watch it. But I do want to say that I genuinely feel the show is a better representation of the story than the video game. Because the biggest problem I have with the video game. Oh, Chase disappeared.
Uh-oh.
I love it. I definitely think that the show. Let me see if I can make Chase reappear. I definitely think the show it gives you all of the story, everything that is wonderful about the story without the gamification of it all, if you will. And I say that that's important because I do find moments in replaying the game where I'm like, fuck, I gotta get through this section before I get to more of the story. And sometimes it does feel like there are some gameplay sections kind of crammed into the game because, oh yeah, this is a video game, not a TV show. And like there's fluff from the game that, like, when you meet David and then all of a sudden you guys go off on a fight scene for a hot minute, or you go and you're almost to Seattle and then there's a giant tunnel where you have to go through and navigate through all these clickers, and part of you, especially once you've been through the game, is like, can we just get through this fucking part already? Like, and so I think the show succeeds in telling an honestly even more nuanced version of the story, while also, goodness, while also, I'm trying to get you back, hang on, because for some reason, there you are. But it tells an even more nuanced version of the story from the first game while cutting all of the like video gamification of it.
Sure. And that's one of the things that I do hope they, with season 2, like, are able to address. Because, like, well, I don't necessarily feel that with the first game. It is a...
Damn it, why did you disappear again? Damn it. And you even went silent.
Uh-oh.
Oh, well, now you're not silent. What? Why did it silence you? Oh, I wonder if it's happening when I type.
No idea.
I don't know. That's weird. Sorry. Please continue. You were talking about you hope season 2.
Yeah, like, again, as someone who has not seen part 1, or season 1, I should say, like, I don't have a lot in there to talk about, but one of my big issues with part 2 was the length, and the amount of times where the game feels like it's about to end and doesn't. And I think because you have some of these moments in the game that feel like they're dragging on, they are video gamey, they are walk and talk sections, you are kind of waiting for the next action scene or the next cut scene, and it can drag on for a little bit. And that can be totally eliminated in TV, which is nice, and suits that type of narrative a little bit better. So I'm definitely going to watch season 1, and I'm excited to watch season 2 because I think there's a good story there in The Last of Part 2 that can be told. I think it's not told in a super well constructed way. I think there are issues with it. I think the game is at odds with itself and its narrative essentially the entire time. And yeah, it's just one of those things. I don't know if that's how we want to segue into part 2.
It is, but I do want to say one thing about part 1 that segues into part 2 as well. I find it a little bit funny that 2 of the things that part 2 is like known for are also featured in part 1, and it's never really talked about. Like the dual protagonists of Ellie and Abby. There's a section of The Last of Us Part 1 where I don't know about anybody else, but when I was playing that the first time, I thought Joel was dead. I thought we were just playing as Ellie for the rest of the game. And like the fact that he wasn't dead was a shock. And so like they did play with the idea of 2 protagonists in part 1.
Yeah.
With that.
And I like the Ellie section of part 1. I think it's a really good section.
Oh yeah. And so the whole premise of the impetus for part 2 is this random NPC that you killed had a family and it mattered. That's the whole story of David and his gang in part 1, is that those random dudes you ran into at the university turn out to be David's people, and you fucked up by killing them, and now they're gonna kill you for that. And so, like, as novel as the concept is supposed to be in part 2, it's a concept that they already started exploring in part 1.
Yeah, and the idea is interesting, and I do think that part 2 tries to take that to the next level of like what type of story can we tell? And it is like, what if we told the story from the perspective of someone who knew the NPC? And I think that's a really good concept. But where I think it falls apart is how the game plays. Is the whole concept of, hey, be careful of what you do even in the post-apocalyptic universe, because that person that you took out may have a family, they may have a kid, they may have a husband, a wife, something, and they may not appreciate what you did and they may come after you for that. And that's cool. Like, other games have done stuff like this where it's like, oh, you shot this one person when you didn't need to, and all of a sudden, a gang is coming after you, right? Like, we've seen it before.
I
But
literally did that in Adamfall when I killed a quest NPC.
yeah, like it's not new, but the way that they made an entire game off of that concept, and it's not just a piece or like a storytelling element, is a really cool idea of like, hey, there's an NPC that you took out, and that NPC has a family, and that family does not appreciate what you did, and they're going to come after you and they want revenge for what they did. Okay. And now we're going to tell the story of the person who wanted that revenge. That's a good idea for a story. The issue with this for both Ellie and Abby is that neither of them at any point outside of like maybe like a walking talking section address the fact of like, yeah, Abby, you're really upset that some guy came by in the zombie apocalypse and popped one between the eyes of your dad. You have popped 30,000 people between the eyes. Do you not think those people could possibly have families? I understand that you want to get revenge against the guy who popped one between your dad's eyes. We get it. How does this justify killing 1,000 other people? Like, you are, and it's like, sure, you can use it as the narrative of she's becoming the monster that she believes Joel is, but at the same time, they don't do a good job of
Did
addressing
Joel
that.
not shoot hundreds and hundreds of people to protect Ellie and then shoot a bunch of people to get Ellie out of the hospital? So like
He
the
did.
argument is the same.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead. We're almost there, I promise. We're edging it out. But that's why I say Abby is a great analog, a great foil to Joel.
Yeah. But my issue with Abby, I have a lot of issues with Abby. I have issues with Abby's backstory. I have issues with Abby's story as a character with the wolves. Like, the thing about Joel is his story is not about revenge for his daughter. That's not what the story is about. His story is about surviving. His story is about finding his love for another person. His story is about not only surviving for himself to make it out of the post-apocalyptic world he lives in, but to understand that, hey, sometimes it's more important to have someone to fight for than just your own, just wait to get to, the next morning. And that's his story. And it's a very good story. And yes, he does go about it the wrong way. He kills hundreds of thousands of people throughout the course of the first game. But at the same time, his story is not rooted in, I'm going to get them back, because what they did to the people who killed Sarah are never really referenced again. They're gone. like there like nothing really happens that like you go from literally Sarah dying, they cut away from Sarah dying to what, 17 years later, uh and the whole world is different now. Like the people who took out Sarah, the CDC private military corporation is essentially gone.
I mean, E-Ray does bring up very accurately that revenge was done immediately because Tommy shot that dude in the head.
Yeah.
Like revenge was
right,
taken immediately.
right. But again, that's not the story of Joel.
No.
This is the story of Abby.
Now,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you just hit the perfect segue. In case you're not watching the stream, which I don't think you are, check your Discord. I just sent you a TikTok that I'm about to play right here on the stream. It's Craig Mazin, the director of the TV show, talking about season 2 and the theme of love and how part 2's theme of love is it's still a theme of love. Like, I'll let Craig explain, but watch that video while I'm showing it now.
Okay.
What does the show have the opportunity to clarify and deepen?
I think when we're talking about this part 2 in particular, a lot of people describe it as a story about revenge. And I don't see it that way. I think that people engage in behavior that they may be defining as revenge because it's a simple way to justify whatever it is you're doing. But what I love about that game is that it's not really a question of avenging people or seeking revenge for things that people have done. People are wounded in some way because they loved someone. And now they are trying to make that pain go away. And the way we choose to make that pain go away as human beings is oftentimes really, really counterproductive. It's just part of our faulty wiring. But we all have to deal with it, all of us, and without the mushroom apocalypse happening either. That's why I think this game connects with people, and that's why I think the show connects with people.
I love that video because that video is a reason why I'm so excited for the season 2 of the show, because I feel like Craig gets it and gets it in a way that Neil doesn't because of Neil's biases in what drove him to write this game. And yeah. I want to bring that up really fast because as we dive into this, so Neil has said, if you haven't read, it's in my Discord. There's a wonderful Washington Post article from 2000 or from 2020 when the game came out, where they talk about the evolution of Ellie, and Neil Druckmann talks a lot about the creation of the game, the impetus of the game. And one of the things that's really interesting is he specifically refers to a video from 2000 that was online from the year 2000. It features 2 Israeli soldiers and they get attacked by a crowd and the crowd cheers. And this is a crowd of Palestinians. Hang on, TikTok's yelling at me. I get it. Shut up, TikTok. But it is a crowd of Palestinian citizens who attack 2 Israeli soldiers, and then the crowd erupts in this cheering. I'm not going to show the video, but he remarks about the feeling that he had. So if you are unaware, Neil Druckmann was born on the West Bank in Israel and born into this conflict, and it is part of who he is, and it plays a big role in his writing and his philosophy. And I'm not saying anything bad about that. I'm just saying that when critiquing art, we have to also understand the biases of the author. And in this case, he specifically was talking about that video incited within him a rage, like a primal white hot rage, and it made him want to punish the people who were cheering at this. And he eventually calmed down and he like he very much like he pushed those feelings away, but he said that feeling of revenge, that feeling of like hatred that he had was the kernel of a story. And that feeling is what he would use, what would eventually become The Last of Us Part 2. And to understand the themes of this game and to discuss it well, we have to understand that Neil, the writer of this game, the creator of this game, truly believes that within every person there is that capacity for and that understanding for primal white hot rage and a desire for revenge and vengeance. And I think one thing it's so important to bring up, because if you do not agree with that sentiment, that within every human is this like desire for revenge, this capacity for white hot rage, you are going to take issue with the characters and with the way this narrative goes. Because that is the premise that you have to understand and agree with in order to understand the justification for the actions that characters make.
Yeah, kind of like what E-Ray says. Like it does come down to we don't know. Like how far do you have to be pushed for that to happen? Maybe you kind of have an Obi-Wan Kenobi complex where that nothing could possibly push you that far. But I think before we get into some of the more socio-political things about The Last of Us Part 2, including like the Zionism behind the story, the mishandling of certain groups and stuff like that, I think like the one thing that I kind of that plays into this a little bit was with the theme of revenge and also the theme of love, like that Craig Mazin brought up, was it's like these themes are prevalent throughout the entire thing, but there are so many issues with how those themes are contradicted. And one of the prime examples that I just feel like this game in so many ways was out of touch with itself and out of touch with reality is the scene, and I feel like, because I can't remember the character's name, the scene where Ellie goes to that building and she beats the ever loving snot out of that person, and then like it cuts to her crying in the shower.
Mm-hmm.
My issue with that is the opening cutscene for that sequence is her putting a knife through the neck of someone she doesn't know. Like, that's funnily enough playing a PlayStation Vita, which I think is hilarious. And we know this is not the first time she has killed someone. We know that, like, from the first part, from Last of Us Part 1, and from everything leading up to that sequence, and then you do that, she is trying to Nora, thank you, E-Ray, Nora, and she beats and tortures Nora, and she takes issue with that. And I'm just like, this doesn't make sense for her character to be crying in the shower at this point. If this happened in The Last of Us Part 1, it would be way more impactful to see. And we do get a little bit of that in Part 1. And it's just this whole thing of, what story are you trying to tell? Are you trying to tell the story that Ellie is struggling here? Are you trying to tell us that she's not? If she's not struggling, then why is she going through these things? I think it's a very confused narrative. And I also think that the confusing narrative of one of my biggest issues with the other part of the game with Abby that falls into this is they take away Joel and they replace Joel with Abby. And by design, it's supposed to be an uphill battle of you liking Abby. And again, the whole point of revenge is, how do we justify her plot for revenge? And the thing I do not like about and again, it's not Abby's character, it's the way she's portrayed. is that you take a character like Joel, and like I said about his house and how they show us that he is relatable, that even if he makes a mistake, you understand. You understand that this is a guy that was not, you know, for all intents and purposes, not an important person in life. And his world is turned upside down. And you relate to that. You relate to the fact that this could be me. I could be Joel. Abby was the daughter of a doctor. We can only assume that he was a doctor before the apocalypse. So she probably led a semi-privileged life before the apocalypse. And because he's a doctor, he's involved with Wolf. And they are at the time of Last of Us Part 2, they are in a position of power. And we see this through gameplay. And I think this is creative that like Abby has better aim. Abby does more damage with melee weapons. She is the better combatant overall. And I think that's creative. And I think that's interesting. But they do everything about her character is unlikable. Her privilege is unlikable. Her snootiness is unlikable. Her like freak out when she sees death every single day and one of her friends dies and she freaks out over it is unlikable, because it's just like, we have been watching people die since part 1, and you're expecting essentially a spoiled brat. I'm not trying to be mean towards Abby, but that's kind of how she comes across. And it's just one of those things that I think that there were so many facets to Abby's character that stood in the way of her being likable, her being a character that you can relate to, because her living in the stadium, her having a comfortable bed every single night, when she's about to go out into the world, she has like an inventory of weapons to choose from. And it's just like, part of the thing that made Joel and Ellie so relatable was their struggle, was how they struggled like the common people, and that common struggle translated into the post-apocalyptic world. And Abby doesn't have any of that. And that's my issue with trying to take a character that comes from that much privilege to make them relate. It is like, I know that it's like Elon Musk trying to be a relatable gamer is what it feels like half the time.
So, okay, now I gotta jump in. That one I gotta jump in, because I disagree with that, and I will put it cards on the table. I feel like Abby has more justification for the things that she does in the game than Ellie does. I am firmly Team Abby, and solely on the basis that Abby wants to take revenge on the one man who took her father away from her. She has Ellie and Tommy dead to rights and does not kill them. She chooses only to exact revenge upon the person that she felt the need to revenge. Ellie goes on a murder spree through Seattle, killing God knows how many people, a pregnant woman in cold blood, a ton of people. And like, I'll get to the relatable thingy, Ray, I promise. But like, I'm laying my bias on the table first, where like, I felt, and I think it's partly intentional, I felt like Ellie was wrong so much through the opening parts of the game, because I swear to God, but sorry, but that made it tough for me to relate to Ellie, because I felt like Ellie was just wantonly murdering everyone who was there. And so I felt that Ellie was harder to relate with. And I understand everything you're saying about Abby not being relatable. I don't think that it is necessarily fair to say that Abby is unlikable because she didn't struggle enough, because her life wasn't hard enough. Like, it feels unfair, and I think intentionally unfair. I would argue that it feels almost intentional that, like, okay, we're gonna pile on these things to make her not relatable to you, to make you feel like all of these things, because at the end of the day, she's still a little girl who lost her father. And that is relatable. The fact that all of this that she does, she trains, she's better with weapons, she's stronger, but she's still at her core a little girl who lost her father.
She is. But here's the thing, and this is like another talking point that relates to Abby, but is more so about Joel. What I think was the biggest failing of The Last of Us Part 2 with Abby was, I think she could be a really good Joel replacement. I love the idea of the person who killed Joel is more closely related to Joel than you think, and you learn that throughout the story. I think that's great. The magic of The Last of Us Part 1 is not the environment, it's not the storytelling, it's not the music, it's Joel and Ellie. It is their relationship. That is the most magical part of that game. To the point that my top 5 standout moments of The Last of Us Part 2 are all Joel and Ellie flashbacks. The end of The Last of Us Part 2, when Joel says to Ellie, if I had the chance to do it all over again, I'd do the same thing, is heartbreaking in all of the right ways. And when you have the sequence when they're in the space museum and they're sitting next to each other in the shuttle thing, like, it's a magical moment. And what I dislike about what they did with Abby, they did not have to make her the character that she was. And it's not so much about the struggle. It's so much about that she lives a better life than Ellie and Joel did. And to me, this is like a political thing, is this is the rich enacting revenge on the poor.
But does that make her suffering less impactful than Ellie's?
But to me, it's not about the suffering. It's not about, like, yes, you're right, she's a little girl who lost her dad, and like she's going to enact revenge on that. But it's also a moment of when one of the standout moments is I think it's Jesse, the other guy, when in the movie theater, and also this is just insane, when he gets shot, it's just boom, down.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, whoa, what the hell? And it is them, like, they're tired of what Ellie's doing. I get it, but it is, again, the entire time I was playing The Last of Us Part 2, when the WLF was coming after Ellie and her friends, I always viewed it as the rich are attacking the poor because of the stadium, because of how they had every advantage over them. Not that they aren't entitled to their emotions, not that they aren't entitled to love and care for one of each other, but it was just one of those things that nothing about that story really needs to happen with the stadium. Nothing about The Last of Us Part 2 needs to have this arsenal of weapons and like a fleet of armored trucks. Nothing about the story requires that. I do not understand why they had to have these aspects of privilege baked into Abby when it was so unnecessary.
I think you're right. And I think this dovetails into where we're not quite ready to go yet. There are 2 stories being told in The Last of Us Part 2. One of them is Ellie and Abby, and one of them is Abby and Lev. Mm-hmm. Abby and Lev is the problematic story. It's the story that doesn't belong, and it's the story that introduces these problems that you have with Abby. Because I can argue that we could argue, that they're both rich in their own ways, their communities. Like, we do see Jackson, and with Jackson there is a community, there's a love, there's a familial thing, whereas Abby, yes, she grows up in and lives in this better environment, ostensibly, but it lacks the familiarity, it lacks the closeness, it is cold, it lacks connection. Like, you see her when she's like grabbing her lunch tray and she's just going through this mob of people and there's no interaction, whereas when Ellie is in Jackson, it's like everybody knows everybody, this is a town, everybody's friends, they care about each other in a way that she doesn't have. So I can point to reasons why you use this specifically to juxtapose her life and Ellie's, but not to necessarily show that one is better than the other, but to show that they're better in different ways. You can see that what's funny is Ellie grows up in a world, or is living in a world, with almost more civility, more humanity to it. And she takes a path that leads her down an arguably really inhumane direction. Whereas Abby grows up in this almost inhumane setting, in this, like, there's not the same level of familiarity between the people living there, but she veers toward the opposite. It's like, but still, like, does inhumane things. It's like, I can make a point to how these fit together.
Sure.
However, I will concede that everything that you see with the wolves is not there. Druckmann did not place it there to juxtapose against Ellie. It is primarily there to juxtapose the Seraphites.
So the Seraphites for me was, let me break this down for you. I get the game basically at release. I play it for a couple hours and I put it down because I'm just not having a good time. Like, I'm not enjoying the gameplay. I'm not enjoying the story. I'm not enjoying how the story is unfolding. I'm not enjoying what they've done with Abby, et cetera, et cetera. I put it down. I think it was like a year later that I was like, you know what? Stop being a baby. Get through this video game and play it. I get through to when you go to the Olympic Peninsula and you see the Seraphites. And when I finished that with the island burning, I was like, I'm done again. This was like, there were so many little things that were happening throughout the game that I'm just like, I'm not okay with this. Like, this is bad. Like, not like just like, as someone who holds like ideals and stuff like that, this to me, and I think the fact that, like, with Druckmann being a Zionist makes everything fucking make sense with this game, is the hello fellow kids, we smoke weed too. The hey guys, you're into the LGBTQ, right? What if we had a trans person? We have a story of a trans person. Look at this. Look at our trans person. Isn't that so great? Anyways, and then you have Ellie having, or Abby, I'm sorry, having a quick time event to beat Ellie's face to a pulp, and they just get closer and closer in on Ellie's face as you're beating her. And I'm like, I'm at the point where I'm just like, what happens if I don't hit X? I don't want, like, number one, I like Ellie, and I think it's more of a testament to Last of Us Part 1 than 2 of, like, I do not want Ellie to be harmed, because it was so moving when Ellie was so close to being harmed in The Last of Us Part 1, and you felt the tears, and you felt like when Joel is hugging her after what David is trying to do to her, you never want to see Ellie harmed again. And to me, it was like, this doesn't feel like you're trying to invoke emotion. This feels like you're trying to show a woman being beaten. Like, that's what this feels like. And then when we get to the Seraphites, and you have, what is it, 12, 15 hours at this point of game, where you have Lev saying, stop calling us scars. We have a name. We are not a slur. We are not just this name you can make up. We are a good people. We have families. We care for each other. We are not the savages you're making us out to do. And Lev is very intentionally not white. And you get to the Olympic Peninsula, and oh my God, the Seraphites are savages. Like, they hate trans people. They're sacrificing people. They shoot their own kind. They are bad people. Despite Lev, even though Lev was cast out by his own people because of how he identifies, he still defended the Seraphites. And they turn around and be like, yeah, anyways, white people are obviously better. Burn the fucking place down. And to me, even though the privilege wasn't like the biggest aspect of it, it felt so tone deaf. It just felt like Neil Druckmann and the team didn't even realize what they were doing at this time, that they weren't telling the story of the rich beating down upon the poor. They just were like, yeah, it would be cool if she had an arsenal to go with and she were just the more capable gameplay mechanic. And it was just like, all of this game, as a person with these ideologies that thinks like, hey, we do need better trans representation. Hey, we do need better indigenous representation, and they shouldn't be, referred to as savages. We should have more care with this stuff. We should like look at people using substances and addiction, and we should look at, queer relationships with more nuance. And for everything to be a fucking slap in the face, to have Abby, who's fucking freshly 18, yeah, everyone had a crush on her when she was 16 or 15 in The Last of Us Part 1. Well, now she's naked, guys. It's just like everything about this game was a slap into the face for it to be like this like very much in quotes progressive story. And it was, to me, the craziest part was how people on the right of the political spectrum hated this game so much because woke, when it was like there's essentially nothing truly progressive about this game. And that was to no end frustrating for me.
Okay. I want to dive into this, but I want to acknowledge one thing first, and that is that I truly believe The Last of Us is two games that do not make sense together. And I kind of want to finish talking about the Abby Ellie of it all. And I kind of want to leave out the Abby Lev stuff for a second, because I truly believe that if you just take the Abby Ellie of it all, you have a really solid game. I think the story is really solid. For me, the comparison of these two women, like I said, Joel saving Ellie in that hospital is a bomb that went off that ruined both of these girls' lives. Because for Ellie, it took away her purpose. Even though we might say she was a child, she shouldn't be able to make that decision. And here's the thing, she might say 1,000,000 times that she would have sacrificed herself, but you don't know what's going to happen, gun to your head in that moment. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And like, but Ellie lives with this guilt, with this lack of purpose, with this understanding, like with this misunderstanding of the world, and she's constantly angry. She's mad at Joel for taking away her choice, for lying to her. She's mad at herself because on some level, she doesn't know if she would have chosen it. Like, she's mad at everyone. And that manifests in the way that she becomes incredibly brutal. And then with Abby, you have this privileged girl who by all means should be fine, like should be able to cope. She probably has therapists to talk to. She should be able to cope for this. But for some reason, when the world fell down around her, like, and she was growing up in this apocalyptic world, she lost the one person that meant something to her. And she's been trying to fill that hole ever since. And I think if you just show her killing Joel, and then Ellie chasing after her, and then we learn Abby's like, I'm just a girl who was hurt too, and then we have that come to a head, like, that story is compelling.
Yes, I agree. Also, it's funny you said like, oh yeah, Abby probably had therapists. Like, no one in this game on either side had anyone say, hey guys, we live in the post-apocalypse. Everyone's gonna fucking die. Get over it.
Shit happens.
Like, and I wanted to listen because it's so unimportant to the conversation, but it was just another like, I fucking hate this game because the Rat King pissed me off so goddamn much. As like it and it's like, to be fair, it was just another one of like, this game only knows how to disappoint me. Is you're in the damp, dingy basement that's flooded, and the Rat King comes, and you've never seen anything like it. And then it's this really intense boss fight. And then it's like you finish the boss fight, and it's like, hey, as someone who's part of the WLF or was there, and like you have like these connections and there's people doing research and stuff, like you might want to bring up the giant horrible next level mutation that seems to be happening up to anyone, and it is never referenced again in the game. And I'm just like,
That's valid.
what do we care about in this world?
Oh, and I'm looking at my notes, and I'm like, I do want to say one thing that about Abby that I agree with, that makes no sense to me in the sympathetic aspect of Abby, is we spend so much time and effort making her sympathetic to the audience. And then you make her a homewrecker. Not only does she have a weird sex scene, but what the fuck is that story? Like, no matter how much I like Abby, no matter how much I might defend Abby and like take her side in a lot of this, that's indefensible, and it ruins my ability to defend her because it was so unnecessary to have this weird side plot where she's fooling around with a married man whose wife is pregnant.
Okay, the sex scene. Let's talk about the sex scene. The most unnecessary moment of a video game in any video game, in my opinion. Harith is right. There is some weird stuff, like there is reports,
I did not know.
There is reports that like this scene was put into the game later, and that like Neil Druckmann really just wanted to get his goods going. But here's the thing. I think that physical intimacy can have very strong narrative implications. And I think even you can have the argument that like the visceral like imagery of intimacy being shown can be really effective. Like there are moments when this is useful to a story, and having two characters having sexual relations can alter the course of a plot. Seeing that on screen can evoke certain emotions, good and bad emotions. This was so unnecessary. Nothing about this story is made better by this being shown. And I do want to say, one of the greatest things that the internet has ever done is they have taken the sex scene frame by frame and rendered each frame in the style of a different video game.
Oh God.
And you can watch this and you can just pause it at any moment and see a different there is a frame where it is just Tetris blocks having sex. It is beautiful. But no, like this was just another thing of just like, what are we doing with this video game? Like, what is the point of what we're doing? Why are we doing this? This is like I have played weird video games. Like we were talking about Stellar Blade the other day. I have no problem playing Bayonetta. It's like I have weird fucking games. I have Genital Jousting on my computer.
That's such a good game.
It's such a good game. If someone were to walk into my room and I'm playing Genital Jousting, and people are like, what are you playing? I'm like, I'm playing Genital Jousting. It's a game where you put dicks into butts and the butts are attached to the balls. I have no problem explaining that to someone. If someone walks in on me playing The Last of Us 2 and they see floppy Abby titties getting fucked from behind, and they're like, "What are you watching?" And I'm like, "I hate that you are here right now. I don't like this, and I don't like that the person walking in is here even more." Like, it's so bad.
Okay, let me jump in and play a little bit of devil's advocate.
Don't play devil's advocate on this. I'm sorry.
I haven't. Hold on. I'm not justifying. I'm not saying it was the right decision. We're back to part one. But I think I would like to believe that the intention is twofold. One, it is to further soften and feminize Abby to the audience. I don't think that is the right decision. I think this comes from Druckmann's personal views, and I think that it comes from, like, if you see her in an intimate setting, that will make her seem less imposing, less threatening. Like, again, I am saying where I think the thought process is. I do not believe it's right, okay?
Because I was going to say, if that was
no. That's not my
failed.
point. I think that's the goal, is because you can analyze this psychologically as much as you want. She's not in a position of power during that scene. Like, she is very much like the victim, if you will call it that, in that scene. I mean, like, she is not the aggressor.
It looks like it went in the wrong hole, too.
And, like, part of that is, again, to weaken Abby in the eyes of the audience. And I don't think that that is the right way to do it, to use sex to weaken her character or to make her more feminine to the audience. I think that is one reason why they included it. And the other, with the whole point, fuck, Chase disappeared again. The other thing, now I have to rant to myself for a second while I figure out why the hell you went away again. Hang on. Oh, there you are.
Oh, good.
Wait,
I'm back.
now you're, yeah, now we're good. But the other point is, Neil really wants every character to be three-dimensional, with the exception of Lev, but we'll talk about that. He wants every character to be three-dimensional and to have these good qualities and these bad qualities. And my problem is, Abby already has bad qualities. We are introduced to Abby with bad quality. All we need when you explain her backstory is make her sympathetic. Give us a reason to give a shit about her. I don't need her to be three-dimensional in different ways. I don't need her to have a complicated love life and to have, like, I don't give a shit about that. Give me a reason to care why she's doing what she's doing, and only that. You've already given me her bad.
Yes, because, like, the whole thing that, like, bothered me was, like I said, the magic of part one was Ellie and Joel. You took away Joel. You should have known this was going to be to get people to relate, to like, to enjoy, and to sympathize with Abby. It's going to be an uphill battle because you're fighting against Joel. And Joel, with all of his flaws, is a beloved character because of the complexities of his character, because he is the three-dimensional character. There's so much going on with Joel, and there's so much going on with Ellie. And with Abby, adding the complexity, adding the privilege, adding the love life, adding the home wrecker, adding all of this stuff, it can be interpreted so many different ways, and you just end up with a character that, like, has all of the potential in the world to be enjoyed, to be understood, and you throw everything possible in the way of that happening. And it's a detriment to her character, because everything you've said is right. There's so many facets to her character that make for an interesting story, that make for a good story of revenge, a good story of love, that make, like, you can say, like, yeah, this character went out and got revenge, and she didn't want to hurt the other two people because they didn't do anything to her, despite her friends wanting that. And then her friends started getting taken down. And then she had an emotional reaction to that, and she wanted to get more revenge because of it. And you end in this, like, Ouroboros of revenge between Ellie and Abby. They're snakes that are eating each other. There's a good story there. it's just the way they handled so many, I'm not going to say every aspect, so many aspects and key aspects of Abby's character that get in the way of that story. And going back to the gameplay, like there's just so many, like the Call of Duty sections that Abby has, where it's just forced combat. It's just like we're just shooting people. Like we shot 50 people back there. Like what are we doing? Like, do we only care about the W?
Damn it. Pause. No. Jace. Why does Video Ninja hate us so much?
I don't know.
Oh, there you are.
There we are.
Sorry.
Rest in peace, me. But I don't know. It was something that I was like, and I'll be the first to like say that, like, I think a lot of times a second viewing or a second playthrough, whatever round of media you can talk, can expose a lot of things that you may have missed, the first time around. And like, for me, I have no problem admitting that like some nuances lost to me on like first viewings or first playthroughs. But this was a game for me that was so upfront with it had its issues so upfront that it wasn't like I had to deep dive on it. These were like things that were immediately an issue. Like then there was other issues with the game for me. Like this is the hot take and I'm totally willing to be destroyed for it. I prefer the gameplay and mechanics of the first game over the second game. I think that the second game tried to go a little bit too over the top with its cinematic nature. Like there's just weird ways the camera works, especially in the melee combat, that removes a lot of situational awareness that I personally didn't like. And there was just a couple things. I felt like some of the puzzles as well were like, there was something about the novelty of the first game where it's like you play like Resident Evil or Silent Hill. It's like you need to put the beetle gem inside of the clock of destruction and that will open the door to the basement. And it's like, yeah, these are video game puzzles. And this is like, hey, there's a ladder somewhere and we're just going to put this ladder through a hole in the wall. And it's a novel idea for a puzzle. It's like the same type of puzzles we've done like in Half-Life 2 and stuff like that. But it's now just like the shambles of the world around you becoming the puzzle. And then it was like there was a moment where it's like Dina has to plug in an oversized outlet into a generator. And I'm like, okay, all right, we get it. It's everyday items becoming a puzzle. We've done it before. You don't need to hide a giant 2-prong outlet in the grass and then make me plug it in. And it's like, these are little things. Like these were things that were not like to the detriment of the game. Like it was just like, yeah, this to me is like a downgrade from the first game, or like they're playing off of the novelty of the first game that like on its own, not an issue. Like if the other issues we've discussed did not exist, I wouldn't even think about these things. It's just like, yeah, there's just some weird puzzles that like the clock puzzle in Resident Evil 3 is god awful. Do I think that Resident Evil 3 is a bad game? No. But like it's just one of those things when so many things are compounding it, so many other things start to just poke through and like you remember just frustrating moments. And it's just like there's just so many moments of the game that like could have been better. And the fact that the story had so many issues just made those things stick out even more. I know the gameplay, thinking the Last of Us 1 gameplay is better, is the hottest take of all, but
I think one thing I will shout out the gameplay for that I did really enjoy, it's the one place where I think the narrative and the gameplay match, is
the snowball fight.
Okay, that's great. But
the snowball fight was great.
It's 2 moments, and one of them you mentioned earlier. It's when Abby's beating the hell out of Ellie, and the end with the fight between Ellie and Abby. There is a visceral reaction in both of those moments as a player where you don't want to keep pushing the button. Like, you don't want to hurt Ellie, but when you see how bad off Abby and Lev are, you don't want to really hurt Abby either. Like, there's a moment where you're hurting for Ellie's soul in that moment as much as you were hurting for her body in the other, where you're like, maybe it's time to let this go. And the reason I say that is like, I do think it plays well with the gameplay of it all in those 2 moments in specific, because you feel the brutality of those moments and it makes you not want to push the buttons. It makes you struggle as they're struggling.
So the first part with Abby beating the crap out of Ellie, I do not like. And it is it's very interesting because I think it's where The Last of Us 2 both fails and then succeeds with the same moment of I don't want to beat Ellie to a pulp. Number one, it's a 18-year-old girl. This feels weird. Like, it's not even so much the grotesque. Like, we just saw, Joel's face get smushed in by a golf club. Like, the first game you have, like, you're putting people's necks into broken glass. Like, the game doesn't shy away from visceral brutality. Like, that's not the issue. I think the issue with the first section in the movie theater, and the way they handle Jesse's death, where that is some live leak shit in that moment. But like, that is uncomfortable because number one, it's an 18-year-old girl. Number two, it's fucking Ellie. And it's like, I do not want to hit Ellie. I think that was a poor choice to make it interactive. I think I know I'm gonna say
See, and
it was in poor taste.
I can understand that, and as someone who very famously took a lot of shit on TikTok for not liking the trend where people were using Omni-Man's speech at the end of Invincible to talk about beating the shit out of their imaginary future children. I can see where you're coming from about the feeling of beating up an 18-year-old girl or an 18-year-old young woman. Like, you are absolutely right. And again, I love that we disagree on this because I just think that the difference in the brutality, a lot of that, like the really brutal stuff in The Last of Us, happens in cutscenes. And this put the brutality of those moments in your hands. You had agency. And in the same way that you had to act as Joel at the end of The Last of Us Part 1, but in a way that makes you, like, you're a lot more likely to feel like this is a fucked up thing to do when you're pushing the buttons for it.
The one thing I will say about the and I want to say that in a both a funny way but also a serious way, my favorite part of The Last of Us Part 2 was the ending. Number one, because it was finally fucking over. Number two, I think they handled the end of that game really well. I think the fight on the beach with Abby and Ellie, I did have that moment of like, I don't want to beat Abby. I don't want to drown Abby because even if I don't like her, I don't like her character, and like this game has made me very frustrated with her and how she was handled. Um, I think the game at that point is doing a good job of what you are doing is not helping. And what you are doing is, like I said, it's that cyclical thing, is that you are just going to in this world they live in, you are just going to continue to find yourselves in these situations until it's you that is on the other end of the bullet, right? And I think that's a really good and powerful moment where it's like, you don't want to hit X again to hurt Abby, despite everything you've been through, despite you may not like her. I think they were very successful at that. What Ira is talking about, Abby bites off Ellie's fingers, and I think there is a beautiful poetry to the fact that in her pursuit to get revenge on Joel, she didn't. Getting revenge doesn't mean killing Abby. And Abby did take away the one thing without even knowing. She took the one thing that would connect Ellie back to Joel, and that was the guitar. And her grabbing the guitar at the end, and with Dina's gone. The baby is gone. And she's lost literally everything. And the worst thing she lost was those fingers, because it was the last thing connecting her to Joel. Beautiful moment, like sad, like beautiful in a depressing way. It is that like beautiful sadness, like the moments that you got like that, and then again, you have the flashback with Joel that is the best flashback of the whole game was at the end. Like I think right behind that is the space shuttle. It's just a beautiful moment, and there's these moments, and again, it just goes back to like Joel was the glue that held The Last of Us together, and you got rid of
Joel
him
had
too
no
soon.
story left. Other than what you see in flashbacks. There is no story to tell with Joel other than what you see in
Here's-
flashbacks. And I
Here's-
think Joel was handled perfectly in this game because of that.
Here's what I would have liked to have seen. I think that I think that The Last of Us Part 2 was too long. And in a way that for a single game it was too long. I also feel that the story they were trying to tell should not have been contained to one game. I think what should have happened was you could have had a very interesting, very compelling story about Joel and Ellie falling apart and falling out with each other because of what he did, the repercussions. And the end of Last of Us Part 2 is the death of Joel Miller. And The Last of Us Part 3 is the story of why it happened. And that's the story of Abby. That's how I think that story should have been handled.
I see that, but I will say this. The one thing I did not know going into The Last of Us Part 2 was that Joel even had flashback scenes. I did not know that. All I knew was that Joel dies in like the first 3 hours of the game.
Yeah.
Like, I did not know that he popped up in flashbacks. And the first time he pops up in a flashback after that, oof. Like, it hit me on such a deep, beautiful level. And like, you do not get that sense of grief and like that emotional surge when you see him in that flashback if we just spend the whole time with him and Ellie. And if you do that, now you're setting a precedence where people just aren't even going to play 3 because, well, you killed Joel at the end of 2. And again, we can disagree on this, and I love that we do. I personally think sometimes the bold decision is the right decision, and I think killing him in the first 20 minutes of your speed run, it sets up the moments where you see him again and the interactions between him and Ellie and the people who the ending of the relationship. Like, it makes Joel and Ellie's relationship feel like it's getting away from Ellie, like she's losing him, because all she has is the memories, and by the end she can't even play the fucking guitar. And I think that there is a poetry to starting with Joel, losing him so quickly, and then, like Abby, all you have left are these memories. That's all that you, the player, have too. And I personally think that's the poetry to the way that Joel is used in this game. And I genuinely do not believe there is more story to be told with Joel outside of the times that we see him in The Last of Us Part 2. And while I agree with you that it is too long, I feel like it's because of the bloated political message that comes in the back half of that game that didn't add anything to Joel, Ellie, Abby, which is what the soul of the game is.
I mean, if you, I think you're right. If you take out the Seraphites entirely and what they tried to do with that poorly, sure, like you cut out like probably 5-10 hours of that game. But no, like I just think that there was something about, and this, for me, it comes back to the magic of Joel and Ellie. And sure, I think there's a point for it to be like, if you rip that away, what kind of story can you tell? But also, I put it in our notes of like, to me, there was almost a feeling of like, imagine doing a Street Fighter game without Ken and Ryu. Like, it's going to be weird. Like the Family Matters final season where they recast the mother, like they recast Harriet, like it doesn't feel right. And there's nothing you can do.
I don't think it's supposed to. I think it's supposed to feel wrong. It is supposed to be, there is supposed to be a hole in you, the player, in the game itself. The impact of Joel's loss on the game is felt throughout that narrative. Like,
it is.
I truly feel that that's the point. You're supposed to feel grief that this isn't like the last one, that you don't have Joel and Ellie. Now, whether or not that whether that transitions to being something that you enjoy and is successful for you is where the question comes in. And I absolutely think we can agree. But I do think that the decision was made with intent, and I think that intent serves the story that they chose to tell.
I think it was done with intention. I just feel like where I disagree is I think there is more story to Joel. Because of where the first game leaves off, there is more. We see that story, we see part of that story, and we do get those flashbacks. But I do believe that having more room to breathe with all three characters, with Joel, with Ellie, and especially with Abby. Abby, I felt, did in all of the I'm going to say 60% of the game where you are playing as Abby, it just felt like she didn't get a chance to breathe. She didn't get a chance to come into her own character. She didn't get a chance to have the moments that really resonate the same way that Joel and Ellie did in both part 1 and part 2. And I think the bold intention of killing Joel right off the front, like, yes, it does make for really good emotional and grieving flashback scenes. You're right. But I also think that having Abby as a character that has the opportunity to breathe and has the opportunity to grow with the audience, with the player, leads to a more cohesive storyline that leaves less frustrations on how certain things are handled within the narrative.
I don't think you can split this game into 2 games. I don't think you can. And the reason for that is because the overarching narrative, which again is drawn from Druckmann's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's funny, it works on this side, it does not work, and this is how we're going to transition to. But the crux of the story between Abby, Ellie, and Joel is that revenge is cyclical. It is a cycle of violence. Like you said, you alluded to this, you said it well. It's the Ouroboros. It is this constant violence. Violence begets more violence. Vengeance begets more vengeance. And it never ends until Ellie chooses forgiveness. And that is why this narrative has to be told as one story. You can't split it into 2, because if you end the game with Joel's death, what is the point of that story? Like, what is the overarching thing? Like, you don't split, like, yes, there is an overarching theme of The Lord of the Rings that stretches across 3 books, but each individual book has to have its own narrative thread. And the narrative of this game is that revenge will poison you. It will ruin your life. You cannot exist in a constant cycle of vengeance, and the only way out is forgiveness. And I feel like if you don't have that all in one story, then what we have is one game that is all about vengeance ruins everybody's lives, and then game 2 is, remember when vengeance ruined everybody's life before? Yeah, well, now we're gonna find forgiveness. You know what I mean? Like, I think that in a world that is as nihilistic as The Last of Us can be, everybody has a dark side. Everybody wants revenge. Everybody feels hatred. You have to find hope. That is
So
what you
here's-
found in the first one, and it's what you have to find in this one. You have to end with hope.
So here's, I guess, maybe where there's a disconnect here is if you break this game up into two different games, I don't think you make this. I don't think you make part one obviously is part one. Part two would not be the story of revenge. Part three would be that story. Part two, I think, again, is the breath. It is the Empire Strikes Back. It is Joel and Ellie falling away from each other, and them going on. And you can sprinkle in Abby in there as well. And just even spitballing off the top of my head, what if she's just another character, and you're just thinking you're seeing stuff from the WLF side, and then at the end of the game, that's when it all culminates, and you realize, oh shit, that's the doctor's daughter from the first game.
Mm-hmm.
And this kicks off the events of the part three. That's what I think is you now have the story of revenge. You have established these characters. You have established how Joel and Ellie were falling apart more. You've established who Abby is, why she would feel the way she does. I think there is more story to tell, not just with Joel, with Ellie, with Abby, that didn't get to be told. And I don't think that, and it's the thing, it's like this could have been a 60 to 80 hour experience, and it wasn't. And I don't think it needs to be. I think it could have been a 20-hour experience and then a 30-hour experience, however you want to be.
Yeah.
I think that there's just so much that could have been done. And you're right. Like the Seraphim stuff could have been cut entirely, and we would have gotten a shorter game overall.
I think that I will say this. I think we're just going to end up circling the drain with this particular point, because I feel like we both agree that the character motivations, like the story there, is sound. Like there's a story to be told with these three characters. We disagree on how best to present that story. And I think that that's what, again, remember when I talk about art inviting criticism and inviting conversation, I don't think either of us are wrong. I also don't think either of us are right. I think that we're telling the same story with different intentions and with different directions. Yeah. And I think that eventually, as fun as that is, we do eventually have to stop saying, well, what if, and just examine what is.
I mean, Final Fantasy VII has told us that there's always more story to tell.
Now, I do want to use this to transition into what I think is the weakest part of the game, what the part of the game I dislike the most. And first, let's just talk about it in relationship to the narrative itself, and then I'll kind of close out with, we'll transition to the political, where the political stuff comes in, and how I think it really actively hurts this game.
Sure.
So, the Seraphites' existence in the game, the conflict between the wolves and the Seraphites, I do not understand what place it holds. I can understand that what we're trying to do is also, one, we're gamifying it because Abby needs gameplay sections too. And and two, Abby versus the Seraphites is supposed to in some way mirror Ellie and the wolves. And this like wanton destruction of these people that they've been told their whole lives. Fuck, I'm making myself like it. They've been told their whole lives that they're supposed to hate these people, or that these people are the enemy, just based on who they are and what they represent. And going into it and finding a different perspective. My problem is neither of them find a different perspective. If Ellie had wandered in here with the intention that the wolves were bad, they were, the wrong side of the equation, and maybe, I don't know, had remorse before the end of killing everybody in there, like, and had learned something about the wolves, maybe there would be something there. If Lev tells Abby all this stuff about how the Seraphites aren't that bad, but then they turn out to just be that bad. And so what are they learning? What character growth is happening for either of them in relation to their opposing groups at all?
I genuinely cannot remember a time where a movie, video game, TV show, book, anything made me more frustrated than the end of the Seraphite section on the peninsula. I was like flabbergasted that the whole sequence happened, and I was just like, that there's no way. I went online like, is there like a branching narrative here that I fucked up? Like, I was like, there's no way that this happened. Like, to me, like watching that unfold, and again, with all of the stuff that Lev was saying and all of the stuff that, like, are we going to get a really good story, like a beeline story of, hey, Abby, because of her time with the WLF, has indoctrinated beliefs that are invalid, and that she has to grow past these beliefs, and that she has to understand that just because people are different than you, or they have a different culture than you, or they may have a totally different view of how this post-apocalyptic world should be run than you do, that there is something you can do about that, and that you can find common ground. And it's just slapped away from you so aggressively. And like the whole Zionist thing where you kind of put the WLF as the IDF and the Seraphites as the Palestinians, it's just like nauseatingly bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's something that, like, again, like I wasn't aware about the whole Neil Druckmann thing before we started talking earlier today about this, and it's just like, didn't think I could hate this game more.
Mm-hmm.
And this just compounds it so much more, that like that Neil Druckmann felt so compelled to put his, in my opinion, bullshit view on how the world works into a game that he tried to pass off as some type of progressive, narrative that, we're not going to stand up to people who think that, it should be straight white men all the time, and that, like, we don't have to have these conservative, views on everything and all this stuff. And I'm just like, you're a faker, dude. And I smelled your bullshit when you did the weed stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like the weed gas mask thing, and it's just like, oh, we have marijuana in the video game, guys. Isn't this so cool? And I'm just like, it's just like, you're a faker. You faked your way through this whole fucking video game. And it's just so upsetting to me, because, like, again, I genuinely loved the Last of Us Part 1. Like, again, it is in one of my top 10 video games, maybe top 5. And to have everything just ripped away, and a game that you felt was going to line up with you ideologically, and it just falls flat on its face every time it tries to bring up any of these ideologies. And it's just like, it's so frustrating. And the Seraphite thing, just like, the more I think about it, the more I get frustrated with it.
All right, I'm going to bust through the door like the Kool-Aid man and give an explanation of this for people who might be familiar with only parts or not familiar with it at all. So, as I said earlier, Druckmann was born on the West Bank in Israel and has admitted that the Israeli-Palestinian war has had an influence on both of these games. And even the idea of being in a post-apocalyptic world, this is a post-war world, which is similar to the war-torn world that he was born into, with the Bank of Israel and the Gaza, which is near the Gaza Strip, which, as we know today, is still in conflict and has been for an extremely long time. I talked about how Druckmann was inspired to write a story about revenge around the feelings that he had watching crowds cheer when they killed 2 Israeli soldiers. And I feel like that is important because I don't agree with his idea that that type of rage is just inherent in people. I think it is very much built upon his background. He is connected to this in a very real way, and he feels that white hot rage because he has been raised in this. He has been like, this is part of who he is. And I don't think that every person experiences that type of rage, that type of deep, primal, generational anger. And I think that he used that to fuel this story in a way that is detrimental to it, because it assumes much about the human condition without him processing his own internal biases to this. Now, where we get to the direct confrontation of the game is, so if you look at the walls of the Seattle barricade and then you look up the walls that surround Israel, there is a visual comparison between the walls of Seattle and that Fedra put up. And that is important because Fedra in this case is similar to British occupation of Israel prior to the Israeli-Palestinian war. Fedra, the British are driven out, and what's taken over is the wolves. These are the Israeli people. And then, of course, the Palestinians are on the outskirts. They are the less cultured, less civilized. That is the narrative that is presented by their enemies. And that is what we see ascribed to the Seraphites. They are referred to as scars. They are subhuman in a lot of ways to the wolves. The wolves have this privilege. They have the walls. They have the allies, the guns, the people. That is the state of Israel. Like, compared to the Seraphites, who are essentially living in huts, living in holes in the wall, in caves. Even the series of bridges that connect the skyscrapers of Seattle mirrors the underground tunnels that run through Palestine to allow them to communicate and navigate without Israeli influence. Like, this is not as cut and dry as just like, oh, well, you're reaching. Like, this is absolutely meant to show these two parts. And again, the problem is that Druckmann's whole thing is that there is a cycle of violence, and that is what this part of the Middle East is known for, is this cycle of violence. And he holds that the key to solving that is forgiveness. And that is an Abbey point of view. That is the Israeli point of view. The idea that if you just give up and forgive us, this will all be over. And it comes from that. And the last thing that I want to bring up in terms of understanding Zionism, and I think this is really important to understanding and discussing Neil Druckmann's point of view and this narrative. The Holocaust happened. It was a tragedy. And from the Holocaust emerged two philosophies within the two prevailing philosophies. And they both center on the words, never again. One takes the more peaceful approach of, never again will something like this happen to anyone. And the other side says, never again will we be victimized like this. Even if we have to be the ones victimizing someone else, never again will we be the victims. And this is incredibly important to understanding not just the current political climate, the socio-political climate of the Middle East, but to understanding this game as well. Because you have to understand that Neil Druckmann, as an Israeli-born man, firmly believes that the solution to the violence is that never again will we be the victims. This is our ancestral land. We deserve this, and never again will we be mistreated like this. So just forgive us and give us what we are owed. And again, so I also want to say, I should have prefaced this earlier. A lot of my study is on specifically Islam and Judaism in the Arabian Peninsula, so a little further east than this. But that 5 to 1500, the evolution of Islam. So like I'm familiar with a lot more than I like have given rise to in the past, or have given knowledge to in the past. But the important thing to understand about Judaism and the Jewish people is that they have been consistently, according to their histories, consistently oppressed. They have been the victim in so many of history's atrocities, prejudices, and there comes a point where you stop being the victim. And that is where these two never again philosophies really emerge, is around this idea that we have been the victim. Either it is our lot in light to suffer because that is what God has demanded of us, or we're done suffering, And I mean, funny enough, you can see that direct idea within the tale of both of The Last of Us. That concept of like, I'm done being a victim. Like you can see how that plays out in Druckmann's writing. And I apologize if this got really heavy for a lot of people or made anybody uncomfortable. But like I said, when you cannot unsee the parallels between the groups presented in this game and the overall story, I feel like you can't have a solid understanding of it and a real discussion without acknowledging this. Because like I said, the whole premise is predicated on this idea that there is a cycle of violence that will never end until both sides just agree to forgive each other and our hero gets their way. And that is simply the author's biases bleeding into the story. And that will always happen. You cannot get rid of all of your biases. But in this case, it is heavy-handed and overt.
Yeah. And I think that really does coalesce into my primary issues with the game, is that it had, from the moment I kind of got through the first half of the game, and then especially when I finished the game, is that there was a sense that the people behind this game did not have the intentions that they were presenting they had. That there was something that they were trying to push and mask with something else. And that always just did not sit well with me. From obviously the Seraphim stuff, but to the stuff with Lev being trans and kind of not really doing much with that plot point. And like, it very much felt like it was a check mark. It was like, this character is trans. We're going to acknowledge that they're trans. And then we're going to acknowledge that they had difficulties coming out as trans and that their people didn't accept them. It kind of how what we see in social media today, when like you have like LGBT people standing up for Palestine and people like, if you show that you're gay in Palestine, they'll cut your head off. And it's like, that's not, number one, that's not true. That's not what's going on. And that's not the point. It's the point is empathy for people you may even disagree with. And that always felt bad to me. A lot of the stuff with Ellie and Dina and how that relationship kind of was presented to us, and like how the really first way we see them, like, oh, Ellie and Dina is like a physically intimate, display, instead of like, hey, there's love and there's caring. And we do get that. We get that like in the little house on the hill, and there's like good moments there, but it's like, your primary way of showing that two women are involved with each other is they have to have sex to prove it. And I didn't like that. And there was just so many of these little things that I was just like, it didn't, so many things didn't sit well with me. And like finding out some of the stuff I found out today with all the Zionism stuff, it's just like, it just impacts that further, and it continues to be a thing. I will say this to kind of round it out and to kind of push away from the political things, is there is something that drives me to play this game again. And it's because one of the locations of the game is right there. That is right next to the convention center arch. That is the Seattle Convention Center right there. Like there's the section with Jesse and the cars underneath the arch. That's right over there.
That's cool.
Yeah. Seattle's a very pretty city.
Mhm.
And I've only lived here for, it will be a year this month. So there's part of me that wants to pick up the remastered version on PC to go through it, like go through it on like story difficulty, and
Mhm.
just like I would like to see some of the stuff that I've been seeing recently in Seattle and be like, aha, there we go, that's that.
Because you're a
Because
transplant to Seattle, right?
oh yeah, like I born and raised in Atlanta, lived a decade in New York City, and then last year moved to Seattle. So like when, so Last of Us came out during the or right before the pandemic. And it was so funny because The Last of Us Part 2 and the Resident Evil 3 remake came out around the same time in 2020. And like Resident Evil 3, if you remember, opens with like news of like quarantine has been enacted in Raccoon City. All people have like stay inside notices. And I'm like, well, fucking shit. But no, like I was in New York and like lockdown was just starting to happen when The Last of Us 2 came out. So it was like, okay, yeah, I'm in New York City, locked in my apartment for a week. And then like I remember like I went through the first week of COVID. I was like, I'm gonna beat a game every day. And one of those games was The Last of Us Part 1. I did go through all of that in a day, and that was a great experience. But yeah, it was wild. And I finished The Last of Us 2 while I was still living in New York. So I haven't touched it since then. And part of me is like, maybe I should go through it. I might go through it on my PlayStation 4, like with Haley, who's lived in Seattle basically her whole life. So she'll know like, oh yeah, that's there. Oh, that's there. So there is incentive to play the game again. And there's thing like having the conversation is good because like you have brought up arguments that no other people have brought up before, which is always great to hear, because I have heard many similar things. I've even had people like when the game first came out, one of the guys I rode bikes with, we were like not like disrespectful to each other, but like we vehemently disagreed. Like they were like, "Oh no, Last of Us 2 Part 2 is great. It's in every way better than the first game." And I was like, "Absolutely not. You're lost your mind." Like 2 years later, we're at a party and he's like, "Hey, I got to apologize to you. I went back and replayed that game fucking sucks, dude." And I was like, "Thank you." But no, like it is interesting because like there's so many people that are so like not including the passionate in the bad way, but there's so many people who are so passionate about The Last of Us Part 2 that I I do not say that it's a bad video game. It clearly had a lot of work that went into it. There's a lot of like, as much as we may disagree with Neil Druckmann, we may disagree or agree with the decisions he made to craft the story. There is a compelling story there. I don't like the way it was told. There are things that should not have been included in this game. There are gameplay decisions that should have changed. The Rat King should have been mentioned at least twice. We can look at all of these things separately and still say it's a beautiful game. The acting in The Last of Us Part 2, second to none in video games. Like, I think Hellblade maybe comes close, but I still wouldn't even put it up there. Like, the acting that the all of the actors who were involved did a bang up job. They knocked it out of the park. The presentation, the moments with Joel and Ellie that like, even if you're me sitting there with your PS4 controller, like, fucking hate this game. Oh, it's Joel again. Oh, they're gonna make me cry. And it's like, credit where credit is due. They did some really good and creative stuff. They did some stuff. I just did not like so many aspects of this game. The length being one of them. The way they presented the story, the political bullshit, um, and like for me personally, just the way the gameplay operated in 2 compared to 1. Like there's just so many things that didn't. Also, like the zombies happen like twice in this game.
Yeah,
I know
you
that's
fight
an
more
exact.
dogs than you do zombies, it feels like.
We didn't even touch on the dogs.
Oh, I don't like talking about the dogs.
The dogs. I will say this, and this goes back to Neil Druckmann trying to make a point and doing it in the wrong way. Is you can 100% tell a story and say, hey, the guard dog you killed, the mechanic of the guard dog, I didn't like the mechanic, the smelling scent thing. I thought that was overbearing for the game. You only needed to kill one to get that point across. And they have you kill so many dogs in that game. And I was like, it goes back to the Ellie beating scene. What do you have against dogs, my guy? Like if it's Wolfenstein and like the dogs are just German shepherds with like swastikas on them, sure, shoot as many dogs as you want, right? Like
These weren't even zombie dogs.
no,
You know what I mean? Like
dogs. And it's like you had a point to prove of like, hey, these aren't just like, guard dogs. Like this is someone's pet that you killed. Oh my gosh, what an impactful moment. I'm glad I don't have to do that again.
it's
Oh,
shock
no.
for shock value.
Yes.
It's the same low-hanging fruit as what do rambunctious kids do? They smoke weed and they have sex. You know,
it's just like, we're gonna beat you over the head with this when it's like, I got it the first time, dude, and I felt bad about it. You did a good job making me feel bad about my actions. You made it. You did the BioShock. You made me think that, hey, going through the motions of video games, can mean something else. Good job. The reason like the BioShock moment works is it happens once. The would you kindly happens once in the video game. You continue to play the game the way you would because like you get it now and you've broken free of the chains that are on your wrist. Like that's why BioShock is so good at its narrative, is it understands that you can only do things so many times. You can only hit people over the head, literally like Jack Ryan over the head once. And it's like that moment is really good. And like the way that Ken Levine does it, the way that Ken Levine does his story, the way he twisted the narrative with Elizabeth in BioShock Infinite, masterful. Ken Levine is who Neil Druckmann wants to be.
yeah.
And what Neil Druckmann does is he, like you said, he does a lot of shock for shock value, and he has the opportunity to shock the audience, to make the audience feel uncomfortable. I think it would have been way more impactful if he would have zoomed in a little less close to Ellie's face as a cutscene with Abby beating her within an inch of her life. And then at the end of the game, you controlling Ellie have to do it. You have to press the button.
I was literally just thinking the exact same thing.
That would have been 10 times more effective.
It would have been more impactful if it was like, watch how brutal this is. And then a few hours later, now you do it.
And you can't, because you saw how horrible it was.
Uh-huh.
And you can't do it. And now you have to do it to Abby. And you can't do it. And it's just like the fact that like it goes back to, did you just want to show us you beating the shit out of an 18-year-old girl? Is that what you were trying to do here? That's what it feels like. Maybe that's not what you were trying to do, but you made me feel like that, and I don't like
Why
that.
is the only way that the women in this game are allowed to show vulnerability is through sex or being the victims of either sex or violence? Yes. That's the reality, is that the women in this game have to be victimized in order to show vulnerability.
I think the later parts with Dina do a good job with this.
Dina is a good character who is...
Dina's great.
Yeah, like I will...
No complaints about Dina.
I'm specifically referring to Abby and Ellie that case, because you're right. You're right. Dina, perfect. No notes.
Dina had every right to walk out on Ellie. Mm-hmm. She deserved to walk out on Ellie, and Ellie deserved to be walked out on. Dina is an incredible character. Dina and Jesse are both incredible characters. I really enjoyed those characters. Tommy, also a good aspect of this game.
Mhm.
I think that those characters did really well. I think that Dina, I don't believe is in The Last of Us Part 1. I don't know if she's in like one of the camps. Yeah.
No, because you don't even see the inside of Jackson in part 1.
Yeah, you're like on the dam.
You see it from the top, but you don't actually go down into Jackson.
Yeah. But like Dina was a character that was introduced. You got who she was. You got her motivations. You understood, like the moment where she finds out about Ellie being bitten and she's immune. Like that's a really good moment. Like all of the moments with Dina are really, really good. They're really, really good. She's a standout part of that game. But yeah, it's just one of those things that like there are so many elements to The Last of Us Part 2 that I can look at and be like, this is good. This is good. Well, Dina's great. The gameplay is good. Like I think the gameplay is good. I don't prefer it the way I like The Last of Us Part 1, but I'm also the person who's like, yeah, the tank controls of Resident Evil were actually the better version. So I'm not a good like litmus test for good gameplay.
Well, and even like, because we're talking about characters, there's one character we haven't talked about, and even when there is good, there is still trouble. And like Lev, I think the game handles Lev very well in a lot of ways. I think that like there's never, among our main characters that we talk to, there's never any like bucking of their identity. No one's like, oh, he's not actually, except for the bad guys, right?
Right.
Now, what does it say about what does it say when you understand the Zionist comparisons that the wolves are totally okay with Lev? It's just the Seraphites who are bad.
Seraphites will cut your head off for being trans.
Right. And that one is very on the fucking nose.
Here's the thing about Lev that I do like. And it is what Lev represents to Abby. And Lev is the character that opens Abby's mind. Lev is the one that adds color to Abby's world, because Abby has lived in this very sterile environment in the WLF, and with the stadium, with everything provided for her, food, weapons, anything she needs is provided for there. But she's also lost out on this, and she has a very narrow worldview of everything going on. And Lev expands that. And Lev is also the character that allows to let it go with Ellie at the end. Lev is the one that shows her that. It's not even a direct thing. It's just very indirect. And that's what was great about Lev's character, was how he changed and shifted Abby's character for the better. He made Abby a better person. And that's what's so important about Lev. How his identity is handled, how his people are handled, how everything else about Lev is handled is piss poor. But as what he is, he's a supporting character, and he does exactly what a supporting character is supposed to do. He is supposed to support the main character and help them on their journey and be a catalyst and be a support leverage to change them and redirect them on the path they are supposed to go. And Lev does a great job with this.
And I want to address something E-Ray said too, the comparison to like the presentation in the Star Wars prequels of the caricature alien races. The difference between that and this is that the intent was not to be like, the Nemoidians are like, the intent wasn't just to be racist. It was to try to represent different cultures. George just didn't go about it well. I would argue that he wasn't necessarily trying to be racist, and where he was, it was because of, never mind. I don't even want to fucking defend it, because there is a thing where like you can't argue that the Nemoidians talk like Japanese people because they do represent a really important role in the economic stuff that George is doing. But that's not my point. Let me say this. My point is that his intention was not to make people look bad by assigning them to a certain race and assigning those traits. It was just his piss poor attempt at representation. Whereas this, the only reason that Lev is transgender is A, to check the box of look how progressive we are, and B, to make the Seraphites look bad because they're monsters for how they treat this poor trans boy. Like, it exists only to villainize, to make the villains look worse, and to check a box on that like, this is the kind of quote unquote DEI inclusion that is more problematic. It's not just the existence of a trans person, it's that this trans person only exists for their trauma to be exploited to motivate the hero.
100%. Because going back to George Lucas is, when you look at the Neimoidians, right, and you look at other characters, you look at the Munes, you look at the Techno Union, you look at the Separatists in general. This is written by a man who grew up with media. That's how Asian people were represented. This is how Jewish people were represented. This is how these characters, like Watto, this is the stereotype I grew up with. Oh yeah, he's a greedy guy. Let's make him a little Jewish. Okay, he's got a fucking yarmulke. He's got a big nose. Like, and it's like, it's not right. It's wrong. But we're also talking about a man who was 50 when he was making these movies. And this was what he grew up. He grew up with Flash Gordon. He grew up with Kurosawa. He grew up with all of the sitcoms of the 50s and 60s. That this is just how they portrayed these people, wrongly, of course, but that's what he grew up with. Neil Druckmann does not have that excuse. There were no, like, the representation of trans people was drag. Like, that was it in the 80s and 90s, which is what he would have grown up on, maybe a little bit in the 70s, but it still doesn't change that fact. He had the opportunity to make Lev's trans identity a key part to who he is, and have that affect the world around him, and have that affect Ellie in a way, that have that like connection, that like, hey, I do have a small connection to Ellie in this way, as like, we are in a very similar group here, and you do nothing with that. In the same way with Dina and Ellie, the first thing you do is you show them fucking smashing, not the fact that they are two individuals that care for each other in a romantic way. That's how you initiate the fact that these are two women who are in love with each other. And the same thing with Lev is that you did not choose, hey, here are the struggles I have, and like it would have been more impactful if like Lev had more interactions with other people, and that those people, even in the WLF, even with the Fireflies, anyone, and just have that moment of like, hey, people just look at me different because of the way I am. And it's hard to deal with sometimes, even when they have good intentions. Something, anything, not a crumb. Not a crumb.
And it's more egregious when it comes from a writer who prides himself on making these well-determined three-dimensional characters. Like, he boasts so much, puts so much energy into making Abby this fully fleshed out character, giving her these flaws like this relationship. But when it came to Lev, it's just like there's nothing to that character. And it's disappointing because, listen, I am a believer that representation matters, and that representation is very important, and just having a trans character in a AAA title play a role beyond just like appearing in one scene and is gone is good.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that that is bad, but there is a difference between representation and positive representation, good representation. And it's fine. Like, Lev is fine. They're not portrayed in a way that is like harmful, but
No.
like, I compared it in my notes. There is this discussion how every African American in film is typically brought in for, like, their trauma is always exploited, and it's dealt with by slavery, racism, drugs, or gangs all the time. And there has been this push to be like, where are the stories about just Black joy? Where are the stories about African Americans that aren't centered around one of those four tenets? And the same thing can be said with queer stories. Like, every story doesn't just have to be about queer trauma. Yeah. And that's the only problem I have with Lev, is that Lev only exists for their trauma to be exploited to teach Abby a lesson. But the lesson that Abby learns is that the bad guys are bad. Like, Abby doesn't learn that, like, people are all bad and we should treat people differently. She just has it reinforced for her that the savages on the other side of town, living on the outskirts, are indeed savages. And that she is part of the good people who do everything good. And that is what makes me, like, upset. Because, again, Lev could have just been really any minority kid. Lev could have just been a kid, and you could say they didn't like kids, like the Hunters didn't like kids. You know, like, there's nothing about Lev that needed that, other than to remind people of the very important, we're the good guys, and look really closely at who we is and who we represents.
Yeah. And it's a shame. And to maybe segue this kind of into a wrap up, is this is something I really, really hope is addressed in a phenomenally better and different way in the show. I really hope we get a radically different telling of the Seraphites. Like, I hope that they are not portrayed the way they are in the game. I hope that if they burn the village, that there is a different reason behind it. I hope that when they show that, if they even show that, if they cut it out entirely. Hello, Watch. Thank you. I do hope that they take measures to ensure that, like, personal harmful ideologies do not leak their way into the show and the way that they did into the game. And I really, really hope that they take the care with that and push back. Because I know Neil is somewhat involved in the show. I don't know to what extent.
He's an executive producer.
I hope they give him pushback on this. And it's like, you don't have to break it down between Palestine and Israel, like, kind of like how I always interpreted it as someone who was not always in tune with what was going on in the West Bank, of like, this feels, especially with the issues that Seattle and the Pacific Northwest and Canada have had with indigenous genocide. I was like, they used the Pacific Northwest to tell a story about indigenous people and butchered it, despite, like, at the same time this game was coming out, and before it as well, where you were finding about the schools, like the schools and the mass graves in the Pacific Northwest. At first they thought it was in Canada, and it turns out, nope, it's in Washington, and it's in Oregon as well. It's in Idaho as well. And it's like, you chose Seattle, like, which is cool. Choose wherever you want. They did Utah, which was awesome, and Utah was beautiful in part one. You chose Seattle. That's fine. And then all of a sudden you decide that you want to tell a story that resembles indigenous people, and you butcher that story. That feels very like, just the only way I can put it is, it's just so tasteless. And to now you can compare that to Israel and Gaza, and it's just like, no way you spin this. Is it good? And I really hope in the show they fix it.
And I really, like, I want to say you're right. And what you've just shown is that the conversation being had here about cyclical violence and about how we resolve that is much more universal than it is presented. And it is presented in that way because the author has very specific feelings that are driving his writing. And I think that where you're looking for, like the story that you're looking for, what I'm looking for about like this mutual learning about the other people rather than just the immediate vilification of another group and then the vindication of that. Like, I think that we have seen in season 1 how much better they handle storylines and characters than even the way the game does. And I say this because, like, I know you haven't watched it.
Right.
But there are just little changes. Like, for example, I am not worried about how Lev is going to be presented in this show based on the fact that the most beautiful love story I've ever seen in television is in episode 3 of The Last of Us. And it is entirely fabricated for the show. They changed the story of Bill and Frank, and they presented us with a beautiful love story with 2 three-dimensional men who are both queer, and it is not played for, look at us, we've got 2 gay guys in an episode together. It is a love story between 2 characters who happen to both be men. And the care with which that was treated, that is the care that queer stories demand. That is what they should be expected. They're just stories about people. They're just stories about people in love. I'm excited to see Dina and Ellie together in the 2nd season because of how well they handled Bill and Frank. It gives me hope that Dina and Ellie will be 2 fully functional people in a relationship and not just 2 gay girls kissing because girls kissing is cool.
Have they announced who is playing Lev?
I don't think so, because I don't think we're getting there. From everything we've seen, I don't think we're getting to. I have a feeling that season 2. I have a feeling the show is going to do more of what you want from the story of part 2.
It's almost like I was right.
Well, I don't think they're going to change the order. Like, I don't think I'm betting money by 55 minutes into episode 1, Joel's head's going nuts.
Joel's dead in
like
episode
Joel's
1.
done. But
Joel's dead in episode 1.
But I do think that we're going to maybe it'll be Jesse's death that is the cutoff, and then we will switch from the theater to Abby's story in season 3. That would be my guess. But they're definitely splitting the story, and we're not getting Abby and Lev until season 3, which again will hopefully. Television is just different than a video game in my opinion. I feel like television has the privilege of being able to stretch these big themes across multiple seasons. However, I think a video game, by the fact that, like, we'll get The Last of Us season 3 in 2 years, but we won't get The Last of Us part 3 for, however many years.
I hope they don't. I hope they leave it. I really, really do.
Oh yeah, I don't think we need a Last of Us part 3.
No. I think like genuinely, I don't think we needed a part 2. I think the way that part 1 ends is so beautiful. I think, there is more story to tell in that world, sure. And they did, and I don't like how they went about it, but there's clearly a compelling story that could be told with that.
Quick question.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Star Wars?
Like movie?
Yeah.
A New Hope.
I knew it. I could have called that just based on this conversation. Not in a bad way, but The Last of Us is A New Hope in the sense that it is a single self-contained story that needs nothing further beyond its credits.
Star Wars peaked in
Yeah,
1977.
I mean, like, if you never had anything else, Star Wars would still be beloved. And the same is true of The Last of Us, where you didn't need more. And all you did by adding more was create controversy.
Does it help that most of my favorite bands, my favorite album is the first one?
You are a lightning in the bottle kind of person.
But here's the thing, like my top 3 Star Wars movies are, this is not helping my case now that I think about it. A New Hope, Rogue One, Empire Strikes Back.
But I mean, like you
Return of the Jedi is one of my least favorites.
You really can compare this to the original Star Wars in the sense that, like I said, part 1 is a masterpiece, and if you never got anything else, it would be perfect.
Yeah.
And if you look at part 2, it is divisive because it takes risks and it makes narrative decisions that you, the audience, don't necessarily agree with. Splitting Luke from the other 2 after we just got them together, you know, the whole thing on Bespin, Han being taken, like, there are so many decisions that we may not disagree with, but were hotly debated,
right?
You know, by our parents.
But to defend myself, to defend myself from predictability, I loved the prequels when they came out, and I loved the sequels. I still love the sequels. This doesn't help my case. I think the prequels get worse as they go along. I think the Phantom Menace is the best, followed by Attack of the Clones, followed by Revenge of the Sith.
That's my guy right there.
Like, Revenge of the Sith is, like, in my opinion, not to stir anything up, it is by far the worst prequel. But for me, this is the hot one. For the sequels, it's Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, Force Awakens. Like I love The Last Jedi. I adore The Last Jedi. And I thoroughly enjoy Rise of Skywalker. I love Force Awakens. I've seen Force Awakens more times in the theater than I think I've ever seen any movie in the theater.
Sit down, child. That's to Darth Xerxes.
No,
sorry.
No, Xerxes. No, you are wrong. Sorry.
Well, I just, like, I'll tell you this. As deep and as philosophical and as political as I get on this podcast and everywhere else, I fucking love Solo.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so much fun.
Fucking good.
I have watched Solo more than I've watched probably any other. Well, maybe not any other, but I've watched Solo a lot. It's just so fun.
It is a movie that gets better every time you watch it.
I get every problem with it. I understand that we took
no problems with
I understand
Solo.
that we
It's
took
so
everything significant that ever happened in Han Solo's life and crammed it into 2 hours, but I don't even care because I have a smile on my face the whole time I watch that movie. You know,
Like,
so, like, my point to that, to compare that, is just that, like, sometimes sometimes you just love a movie. I love the Phantom Menace, you know, I love Rogue One.
Great. Solo's great because it's like, what if we had, like, Mission Impossible or Ocean's 11 in Star Wars? Like, that's Solo, and it's like, this is great. I love this. But no, like, I think you're right. To bring it back to Last of Us, like, The Last of Us Part 1 stands on its own perfectly. It did not need a sequel. In the same way, let's just talk about this. Twilight did not need a sequel.
Twilight
and it shouldn't have gotten one. It got one. It wasn't good. It came back to make a trilogy. The third one knocked it out of the park, and then they lost a little bit with Breaking Dawn. But that being said, anyways,
this is where you lose me. No.
Join me every Wednesday to the Twilight podcast. You want to talk about wrestling? Let's talk about Twilight. No, like, there's so many movies, there's so many games, whatever media that are so good on their own. and do not need a sequel. And a lot of times even when they don't need a sequel, the sequel is incredible. Alien is another really good one.
Mm-hmm.
Alien did not need a sequel. And as much as I think that Alien is better than Aliens, Aliens is still incredible. It's a phenomenal. It changed movies. It's a great movie, and I think that The Last of Us Part 2 was inevitable. Again, we can agree on some things and disagree on others about how that game was handled in all of its facets. The fact of the matter is, they made a good video game. I don't like that video game.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I have like the closest feelings I could possibly feel. Like, I think it's silly to say I hate a piece of media. It's about as close as I can get to hating a piece of media because of how much I love the first one and how I personally feel they dropped the ball with The Last of Us Part 2. Even though they technically did a good job. Like the game looks good, the acting is good. We've gone over all of this. I just don't like how they handled the story in so many aspects, in so many ways. And they should have talked about the Rat King more.
And I liked The Last of Us Part 2. Overall, I was disappointed because I feel like the very universal message that was there at the core of the story gets lost in so much of the author's personal feelings and political views, to a point where it damages the impact of the narrative for me.
Yep.
And so it's not that I hate it. I still really like a lot of it, but I am disappointed in it. And my final thought is that is what gives me so much hope for season 2 of the show starting on Sunday, is that the story is there. And if you get more cooks in the kitchen, like E-Ray brought up earlier, that originally Druckmann's idea was that only women would be affected by the fungus, apparently. And that, yeah, and the idea that you're like pretty much just killing women. And people talked him out of that and into what we got. And I don't know how much truth there is to that because I've never seen that before, but it does track.
With everything else.
It tracks, yeah.
It's not hard to believe.
But my thing is that when you get more people and you get more perspectives, I think this story has nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
And like Harith said, in Craig Mazin we trust. Like, the first season is arguably the best video game adaptation of all time. I would put it up.
Yeah.
I would put it up there next to Fallout. In all honesty, Fallout was also a fantastic adaptation.
I haven't finished it. I watched like the first 4 episodes, and you're right. It is really, really good. You know what? I'm ready to take cover for this. The recent Mortal Kombat movie, so fucking good. It was so amazing. I saw it 3 times in theater. I had such a good time with that movie. I loved it. I don't even like Mortal Kombat that much, but I went to go see it. I was like, oh man, I can't wait for bump 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 Mortal Kombat. And it wasn't that at all. You had like the 2010s boom boom version of that, but God, I love that movie. Sonic the Hedgehog movie, also incredible.
Oh, the Sonic trilogy is the best superhero trilogy out.
I haven't seen
they're
2
so
or
good.
3.
They're so good. 2 gave me the Sonic equivalent of the Avengers circle shot where they're all standing there. It gave me a Sonic equivalent of that. And as a Sonic kid, like, that was my first video. Oh, those strike a chord with me like nothing else will.
There was a moment. So I saw Sonic in the theaters, again, right before the pandemic. So I went to Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn to go see that. And I was like, I went as a fucking joke. I was like, this is gonna be so dog shit. Like I want ugly Sonic back. Bring, this is gonna be the worst thing ever. Like Sonic hasn't had a really good video game in 20 years. All right, let's see what's going on.
Can
The
I?
moment they showed Sonic on screen, I was like, I'm in, baby. Show me more. What you got?
Take a second to copy the link that E-Ray put in the chat. Read that article maybe after this goes off. Holy shit. And I'm going to read you the very last thing on this article because I feel like this says so much about what we have said about Neil Druckmann. And the problem being that we've talked about how he just seems to check these boxes of representation just to check them. It is the way he says this. Elsewhere, after the game's release, Druckmann claimed he had a, quote, secret agenda with Ellie. Quote, I wanted to create one of the coolest non-sexualized female video game protagonists, he said during a talk at the International Game Developers Association in Toronto. And I felt that if we did that, there's an opportunity to change the industry. I know it sounds pretentious, but that was my goal. End quote. When you set out and your intent is to create something, like to push boundaries like that, are you doing it because it's a good story and it's what you want to tell, or are you just doing it so that you can get patted on the back for doing it?
Yeah.
And it comes across very much like that.
There was other stuff going on with The Last of Us Part 1 that wasn't great. Like the model of Ellie had a lot of contention behind it because this was around the time that Beyond Two Souls was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And Elliot Page was in that one, and he had an opportunity to do one or the other and was convinced to do the one from Quantic Dream or whatever that friggin' studio is that does Beyond Two Souls and like Detroit Become Human. And he went with that one, and obviously it was a flop, but they like Naughty Dog apparently had modeled Ellie after Elliot Page to some extent. And there was a lawsuit. I don't know where that lawsuit went.
Pause real fast. That sound was the ads for Hello Kitty on the Inverse article that I was looking at for that E-Ray put in there. Sorry, it very loudly started putting some weird sounding shit. It was sorry.
Or that's just your private browser going off.
I wish, but that was some awkward shit if that was it.
Yeah, but that was a thing. There was apparently like some legal ramification did happen with Naughty Dog because they did not change the model of Ellie. Obviously they were able to continue to use that model, so I think that was settled somehow. But yeah, just like not great stuff all around. There clearly like there's a lot of good in The Last of Us, both 1 and 2. And I don't want to take away from like the achievements of the second game, like the technical achievements. We can joke that like how many times can you remaster one game in the span of 5 years? Like,
yeah.
But there's something to be said about this. Like this is a series that has been mired in controversy since its inception, but it's very special to so many people. And I'm excited for Naughty Dog's new game, Intergalactic. I'm very excited for that game. That looks so far up my alley. It's not it sounds like someone was like, "Hey Chase, we're making a video game. What do you want in it?" And I'm like, 90s anime, spaceships, and glowing swords.
Cowboy Bebop is my favorite anime, and it always will be. And that just looked like Cowboy Bebop, the video game. And
throw in a giant robot at the end, and I'll pay for it in blowjobs. And
Hold
they
on,
threw
hold
in
on.
a giant robot.
Start writing video no.
No, like it's not that I hate Naughty Dog. It's not that I hate the people who made the game. Personally, I was disappointed, but really excited to see what Naughty Dog does in the future. Really excited to watch The Last of Us. And I know this has been going on for 3 hours almost officially now. So
Oh
I
yeah.
will. Oh, good.
I knew
Add quote. Thank you, Xerxes.
I knew that this would be a longer episode because I knew that we had a lot to say about it. I appreciate everyone who hung in there through the whole thing. And I do agree that I want to acknowledge the technical achievement that is this game, because speaking from a technological standpoint, this is easily one of the top 10, maybe top 5 prettiest games of all time. Chase disappeared again right at the end. But it is easily one of the prettiest games that's ever been made, and one of the just like technologically speaking. You're back. I was panicking over that, so I was rambling. But yeah, I mean, like, it is easily one of the prettiest games ever made. Like, it's up there. Alan Wake 2, this, Hellblade 2, Black Myth Wukong, like a lot of these games. I wouldn't even put that. Cyberpunk, like these games that are just like rich in visuals. You can't take away from that.
Yeah, we're in such a good era of video games where like the realism tied with the art direction. Because anyone can make a realistic military shooter, right? That's not fair. That's discrediting people. I shouldn't do that. But when you have realistic looking games that have good art direction, like Xerxes said, Red Dead 2 has amazing art direction. It's a very realistic looking game. The Last of Us 2, how it handles overgrown post-apocalyptic settings is gorgeous every single time. It's beautiful. So yeah, like, it is a gorgeous game. I'm sure the remastered looks incredible. I'm tempted to get it on PC, but I kind of want to play it on PS4 so my girlfriend can watch. So we'll see about that. And
I will say, in terms of technologicals, I want to pitch one more thing to you guys again. There is also a space we are hitting like the ceiling of graphical fidelity. We really are. And realism. And there is a place to also be said for games that are stylistically different, that have their own stylistic vision. And that's why I want to bring that back to South of Midnight, which is, even if you haven't played it, one of the coolest looking games. This stop motion Southern African folklore style of expression that is gorgeous in its own way, without needing to be photorealistic. So I just want to appreciate that, like, we can still have room to grow in other ways. And again, Chase has ran away from me. But I also do want to say, I forgot to mention this at the top of the show, but everybody give Chase a round of applause here, because we are going to be moving Chase and I's episodes of the podcast. So from now on, Wednesdays are going to be just my Sill Pill days. They are going to be my shit I love with people I like days. Chase and I will be meeting in the mornings from now on. Still on Wednesdays, 10 a.m. Central Time. We will be recording our podcast in the morning, due to just some scheduling issues going on. But I am going to continue also doing the podcast at night. But this will open the opportunity for me to have more people I like as well, and give us more topics we can talk about and stuff. And Chase will still be there from time to time. I don't want to speak for him, but he's not here right now. But I'm trying to get it fixed. But I don't know why it's still messing up. But yeah, so you'll be getting 2 podcasts on Wednesdays. In the morning, we will be talking whatever Chase and I are talking about. And then in the evening, we will be having rotating different guests as I can get them. Like next week, Chase, so next week, I don't know what Chase and I are going to talk about now, but I do need to watch Attack on Titan, and we need to talk about that. But next week on the evening show, my best friend and my best friend's wife, Nikki, also my best friend, she's going to be on the show next week to talk about writing. So she's a writer, and she wanted to talk about writing and creativity and the creative process. And I'm going to gamify that conversation a little bit and talk about like the representation of writing in video games, what makes good writing, bad writing. Like when we talk about like Star Wars and the conversation around stuff like that. And Chase, do you have any idea what happened to you, or did you have to dip on purpose this time? You died. Well, I don't understand what happened. Okay, well, then I guess I will sign this episode off by myself. Thank you again. Like I said, I knew this was going to be a long one, but I really appreciate everybody.
We did it! We did it! We did it! Yay!
We did do it. We did do it. But okay, follow Forward Into the Black. Follow Chase if you're not already following him. He's at Forward Into the Black pretty much everywhere, and he puts up with my shenanigans and my very late scripts and how we come up with a lot of this shit on the fly. Don't forget to check us out next week in the morning for Chase and I's Shit I Love with People I Like, and then also that evening where we'll be talking about writing with my good friend Nikki. I am at Dork Knight 619 pretty much everywhere, but also the Dork Place on Twitch and on YouTube. Thank you guys for hanging out today. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. If you want to continue this conversation, any conversation, while I am finishing getting this uploaded to YouTube for the video and Spotify for the audio, go ahead and hop into our Discord. Links in the bio and stuff. Ow. Links in the bio. Go ahead and check out the Discord where we will continue the conversation. I feel bad for anyone who listens to the audio recording of this and accidentally gets banged a couple of times. Good night, everyone, and I will see you hopefully tomorrow.